Chapter 800 Blood Locust Tree Men. Chapter 800 Blood Locust Tree Men. Shwa! A tree root suddenly shot out to twist around Xianyukai. It was extremely fast, and furthermore, it had taken her by surprise. Even if Xianyukai had been on the alert all this while, the sneak attack was still successful because this tree root was right underneath her foot, and was able to twist around her foot in a mere one move. Pa! The tree root pulled upwards, and she was hung upside down. At this moment, at least more than 10 tree roots twisted forwards, and tied her up like a rice dumpling. Ah! Xianyukai could not help but exclaim in shock. Ling Han turned around, and laughed in spite of himself as he said, "I dare to bet that this is a perverted tree." The method of tying up was really too artistic. The tree roots actually trussed up Xianyukai, yet actually outlined the enchanting shapeliness of her entire body, especially her breasts, which were presented as two protruding high peaks. Helian Sun Shui, meanwhile, wore an expression filled with displeasure. Didn't it know that what she hated the most was another showing off the size of her bountiful breasts in front of her? She asked. "Are you still not planning to save her? Why don't we just leave her here so that she won't keep following us?" Ling Han said laughingly. Shio, another tree branch shot out, aimed directly at Xianyukai's heart. This time, it was not to twist around her, but to shoot right through her heart and absorb her life essence. Humph! Ling Han flicked a finger, and that tree root was instantly bounced backwards. Shio, shio, shio. A consecutive 7 branches shot out, heading to *** Xianyukai. "Have you still not learnt your lesson?" Ling Han used the earth overturning seal, and slapped down on those tree branches. Pa pa pa. Those tree branches were all broken. Upon a closer look, there was actually green-colored liquid spraying out of them as if it was blood. On! A bellow filled with rage was heard, and they saw a huge tree uproot itself. Colossal vines wound around each other to form 2 legs. Xianyukai was hanging upside down from one of the tree trunks, waving from side to side with its movements. A blood locust tree man. "Help! Help!" After 2 times wandering on the verge of death, Xianyukai finally learned to be afraid, and asked for help from Ling Han and the others in a trembling voice. Ling Han did not rush to save her, and decided to let this delicate little princess experience a little suffering so that she would learn to be more obedient. He looked at this blood locust tree man with a laugh, and said, "Fighting does not depend on bellowing." Hong! The blood locust tree man directly twisted its vines to form an incredibly large and thick palm, which shot to slap down on Ling Han. The swift movement whistled, but the sound had not reached them before the palm arrived, which demonstrated how fast this blow was. "About 7 stars of heaven tier of battle prowess," Ling Han estimated. In this place where shattering void tier elites were unable to enter, 7 stars of heaven tier was extremely powerful. He still used earth overturning seal, and shot a strike at the tree man. Pun! In this exchange of heavy blows, the tree man was instantly sent flying, and Ling Han followed closely behind. Pun pun pun! Another few strikes of earth overturning seal shot out, shaking this blood locust tree man to the point of falling apart. Hunyo darted out, and very quickly dug out a blood-colored crystal the size of a fist from amongst the vines. She said happily, Ling Han, Neo found the tree heart." Xianyukai, meanwhile, was rubbing her bottom in dismay. Although the fall did not cause her pain, these 3 people treated her like empty air, which made her feel very wronged. At the very least, she was the princess of a clan, tender and delicate, yet she was actually ignored like this. Ling Han stored the tree heart away. Now was not the time to refine it. Their time was limited, so it would be best to first find the true dragon's tooth. They did not deliberately look for the blood locust tree men, and journeyed on. If they were ambushed by the blood locust tree men, then they would not be reserved, either, and moved directly to kill them as well as gather a tree heart. There was a really considerable number of blood locust tree men here, and they had gathered about 30 tree hearts along the way. However, these were battle rewards that they managed to get as they occasionally saw abandoned weapons and torn fabric on their way. These were remains of people who had died with grief under the blood locust trees. A day later, they heard a huge bang coming from somewhere ahead of them. From afar, they could see a huge tree was turning around, and its vines had transformed into thick arms, which were raining endless attacks downwards. This huge tree is close to the shattering void tier, right? Helian Sunshua said in shock. Even if she acted, she might not be able to dominate over this demonic tree. Ling Han nodded and answered, "Very strong, it is indeed very strong. If it was not for the fact that it's so hard to break through to the shattering void tier, it would probably really possess the battle prowess of the shattering void tier." Even he felt that it was a thorny problem. He would definitely be unable to defeat this kind of existence, unless he used the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. However, they were fearless. Even if they could not defeat this tree man, they would be able to retreat calmly. Furthermore, Ling Han still had the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation up his sleeve. They went closer, and saw that this tree man was currently engaged in a fierce battle with 20+ people. "The Xianyu clan," Ling Han said. He had recognized a few of them, and Pang Xin was shockingly amongst them. Although there were over 20 of them, they still appeared to be in a difficult situation facing this colossal tree man. A majority of them could only scramble away when they saw the tree man shooting out a fist. Only Pang Xin dared to take this tree man head on, and with his turtle shell as a shield, even if he received a blow from the tree man, he would only be sent backwards, and did not suffer any heavy injuries. It was very extraordinary. This kind of defensive ability was really a bit shocking. Turtle, huh? As expected of the race with the strongest defenses, there was practically no match for it. Pang Xin was responsible for impeding the tree man, whereas the others shot out their respective attacks. However, the tree man's defense was not weak either. When blades penetrated its body, they merely managed to slice off some wooden chips. It was very difficult to harm its roots. Furthermore, wood-aligned creatures' strength lay in their recovery ability. Soon, those wounds that had been sliced open would recover. "Help them!" Xianyu Kai said hurriedly. She drew her sword, and charged into the battle ranks. Although she was rather tsundere on the surface, her real strength was considerably strong. She was in the deity transformation tier, yet her battle prowess had reached the heaven tier. While it was impossible for her to turn the situation around with a single move, her battle prowess was not to be overlooked either. "Princess Kai!" Pang Xin and the others cried out in pleasant surprise. Ling Han did not interfere and said, "There should be some life-preserving trump cards on these people, so it would not go so far that they would die here. Just right, we can finally toss off that willful little girl. She looks beautiful, and her breasts are so big, so what are you being reserved about?" Helian Xianxue said with a hump. She was still very bothered about the fact that the Xianyu clan wanted to marry Xianyu Kai off to Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, grabbed her with a single move, and ran forward swiftly. He said, "Don't be so unreasonably jealous, let's go! Carry, Neo wants to be carried too!" Hu Neo quickly broke into a run and chased after them. Their target was the colossal tree that stretched up to the skies that could be seen from all corners of the second floor. And if they wanted to advance to the third floor, they definitely had to reach the colossal tree and climb it to reach the third floor. The space here was a little haphazard, but that was normal. After all, it was the inside of an alternative dragon. In the past, it could not be sliced apart even when immortals descended into the lower realm. Even though it had now died of old age, it could still give form to amazing mystical powers. They had encountered some bumps on their way, and slashed a great number of blood locust tree men. This caused their advance to slow down a slight bit, but they still managed to arrive underneath the great tree in about less than half a day's time. "Is this really a tree?" Observing it from a closer distance, one could still discover that this great tree that was as wide as a mountain actually seemed to have formed its own bones. Chapter 801 True Dragon's Bloodstone. Chapter 801 True Dragon's Bloodstone. According to the deduction of our predecessors, this is the backbone of the alternative dragon, Helian Xianxue said. The backbone, whether for humans or demonic beasts, was the very most important bone. It was even more important than the skull. If this was the backbone of a dragon, then no wonder it was capable of connecting the heavens and the earth. The dragon's might is gone. Ling Han pressed his hand down on the colossal tree. The bone patterns were translucent white, and even though it had experienced who knew how many millennia, it was unscathed. Yet, there was no longer any little sliver of the aura of an elite circulating within. Otherwise, if such an important part like the backbone randomly released a sliver of aura, most likely any ordinary cultivator in the 9th layer of the shattering void tier would be suppressed so much that his legs would become weak. Don't be careless. Although this place does not have dragon's might, as long as you ascended to a certain level, there would be an intimidatory effect. Furthermore, the higher you go, the more terrifying this intimidation would be, Helian Sun Shui warned. As if giving a demonstration for her words, Peng, they saw a person fall down from above. He landed solidly, and was directly shattered into pieces. He was a member of the sea race, but was not one of the true dragon bloodline. Instead, he was a prodigy of the willow octopus race. There was not a single bone in his entire body, and his race was known for being hardy and possessing strong recovery abilities. Yet he had lost life here. Another person fell down, but this time, he did not die. However, at least half of all the bones in his body had still shattered, and blood poured from him like pillars. Soon enough, his blood had dyed the ground underneath him crimson. He struggled to get up, and forcefully used his origin power to condense his broken bones. He took out a few alchemical pills and swallowed them before he sat down in a cross-legged position and began to refine the medicinal effects to heal his wounds. This bone tree was really too big. Perhaps there would be people falling down from it at every instant, and they merely had not seen them due to their limited field of vision. Do you want to enter the Black Tower? Ling Han asked Helian Sun Shui. Hung, are you looking down on me? Helian Sun Shui asked with displeasure. In any case, she was the bright pearl of the North Sea, and her current battle prowess was possibly even superior to Ling Han's. Ling Han raised his hands with a smile, and said, AI, you are unable to tell good from bad. I just care about you, so I wanted to let you have the chance to take a rest. No need! Helian Sun Shui immediately began to climb up the bone tree. Her speed was extremely fast, and in a short while, she had rushed up to more than 300 meters in height. However, very soon, her speed slowed down. Hunyo, let's go too. And Hunyo nodded crisply, and together with Ling Han, started climbing. As expected, when they had reached about 300 meters, there was a slight pressure exuding from the bone tree. Because no one could fly here, and they could only climb up the tree, they had to hold onto the branches tightly, and were forced to withstand this kind of pressure at every single moment. Facing pressure of this level, Ling Han and Hunyo naturally paid it no heed. They both transformed into lightning, and quickly climbed up the tree trunk as fast as if they were lightning. Helian Sun Shui was not slow either. She had not only learnt the thunderclap 9th heaven, but she herself was a super genius, and the height of her talent was in no way inferior to that of Su Xiu Ran and his group. Over 2 hours later, they had passed a considerable number of people on their way. Some were still okay, and merely concentrated on climbing the tree. However, there were some that actually attempted to attack Ling Han and the others. Then, Ling Han would naturally have no reservations, and moved with no mercy. He shook these people that could not control their hands down the tree, and it would be up to fate whether they lived or died. Ling Han and the others became slower and slower. By now, they had already climbed up 2/3 of the tree, and the dragon's might was becoming stronger and stronger, which caused even Ling Han and Helian Sun Shui to sweat bullets. Only Hunyo was completely nonchalant. At one moment, she would scuttle high up, and in the next, she would climb down and urge Ling Han to pick up his speed. Ling Han thought that if one was to lay an ambush at the entrance to the 3rd floor, the effects would be extraordinary, and the chances of falling for the trap was possibly more than 90%. However, this backbone was really too big, so who knew where the target would climb up from? Thus, if one wanted to lay an ambush, they would at least need a few thousand people to form a circle. Furthermore, every single one of them would have to have battle prowess at the peak of Heaven tier, or still would not be able to do anything against Ling Han. However, Hunyo was completely unaffected by the dragon's might, and with this scout, who would be able to ambush them successfully? Their speed became slower and slower, but after another 2 hours, the three of them still reached the top of the bone tree and entered into the 3rd floor of the ghostly dragon cave. The environment here was different again. All around them, they were surrounded by bare mountain rocks, but every rock was crimson in color from afar. It looked like a land of blood, but also like a burning sea of flames. Crimson was the main color tone of this place, and aside from it, there was no other color here. Dragon's blood grass would also grow in the cracks of the rocks here, Helian Sinshua said. Although they had already gathered over 100, and furthermore, also had an abundant supply of tree hearts from the blood locust tree men, this kind of treasure would never be too much. Ling Han nodded. As the three of them journeyed on, they continued to search, but did not waste too much time on their way. After all, the main focus of this journey was the true dragon's tooth. This was the most valuable treasure. If they wasted too much time here, when the closing time of the ghostly dragon cave arrived, they would be thrown out. Then if they wanted to come in again, that would be something for 500 years later. Their luck was not too bad, and they had quite a considerable harvest on their way. This naturally was because Ling Han had used the Eye of Truth, and could see through everything big or small clearly, which naturally contributed greatly. In this way, their speed would definitely be affected, but the ghostly dragon cave would be open for at least half a month every time. And they had only spent 5 days here by now, so no matter what, they still had about 10 days left. There's a big guy up ahead. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and rubbed his eyes. He had been using the Eye of Truth continuously these few days, which made his eyes feel slightly sore, which in turn was quite uncomfortable. Could it be the demonic ape? Helian Sun Shui mumbled to herself. When she saw Ling Han's questioning expression, she explained. The monsters on the 3rd floor mostly look like a kind of ape or monkey. However, according to deductions, these are possibly the fleas of the alternative dragon, and were formed after absorbing the dragon's blood. Ling Han could not help but wear a strange expression as he asked. Such a powerful creature like the alternative dragon would still have fleas? When it was in its prime, of course not. But in its old age, as its life waned, it might not even have been able to move a single finger. By then, it would be normal to have fleas, Helian Sun Shui explained. The dragon race had a very long lifespan, and even in its old age, with only a single breath left, it might only really die after another 8 to 10 years. Then, it did not seem that strange to have parasites feeding off it in that period. Just like the bloodworms on the 1st floor, they probably were also bizarre mutations given life in its old age and when its life declined. The fleas absorbed the dragon's blood, and actually could grow to a height of about 30 meters. That is really quite amazing, Ling Han said, smiling. However, this huge flea is sitting there motionless as if it is guarding some kind of treasure. Who knows, there may be yet another dragon's blood grass. Come, let's go and take a look. They walked on, and in a short while, they saw that there was indeed a huge red monster crouching ahead of them. It had the shape of a monkey, but had 6 limbs, so indeed, it still looked more like a flea. And underneath this flea, there was a huge blood-colored rock, which had a much deeper color than the other rocks. Helian Sun Shui was slightly excited as she asked, Could it be the true dragon's bloodstone? Chapter 802 Flea King. Chapter 802 Flea King. True dragon's bloodstone was formed from the irrigation of an alternative dragon's blood essence, so a bloodstone the size of a fist was comparable to a 3-leaf dragon's blood grass, and such a large chunk like the one before their eyes was absolutely shocking. Thus, Ling Han and Helian Sun Shui both gasped in astonishment, having a sense of unbelievable surprise. However, this large flea was in the shattering void tier, emitting a terrifying oppressive sensation just lying there in the distance, and approaching slightly closer, Ling Han's and Helian Sun Shui's skin was about to crack. Their physiques were the level of 9th to rare metal, yet they couldn't even get close, serving to show the powerfulness of the great flea. Shattering Void tier 10 stars, 12 stars, or even 13 stars of battle prowess? Ling Han had a feeling inside that this flea roughly reached the level of the 15-eyed Corpse King, and could compare to that great silver spider in Fire Country's ancient mineshaft. It would be useless even if he unleashed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, as it would be instantly destroyed. What to do? The treasure was before their eyes, yet they could only stare blankly at it. Let's go! Let's go! Hunyo pulled on Ling Han's hand and started to walk forward. She really was young, completely not knowing what fear was. Ling Han held her back and said, "We can't, the presence in front is too powerful. We can't endure it, and we'll explode immediately." Originally, Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation could be used to pull aggro one, but this large guy was too powerful, and annihilating the Ice Dragon and turning its head would only be the matter of an instant. "But Nyo's not afraid," Hunyo said, skipping and jumping about. The little girl's talents were unusual. She was unafraid of the coercive pressure, and even poison, fire, ice, and whatnot were ineffective against her. Previously, she even rushed through Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire's Path of Five Senses blockade. But the problem was, she didn't have the Black Tower, so how would she collect such a large Bloodstone? Moreover, the Black Tower was as small as a mustard seed, and couldn't be brought with Hunyo, or else she couldn't sneak closer and then have Ling Han suddenly appear to snatch the true dragon's Bloodstone immediately, then hide back in. "Nyo will draw it away," Hunyo volunteered. Ling Han shook his head. "No, that can at least rival the 15-eyed Corpse King, being probably the most powerful being in Ghostly Dragon Cave, so that's why it's guarding over such a large true dragon's Bloodstone. You can't outrun it. Don't underestimate Nyo." Hunyo was unconvinced. With her hands on her hips, she said, "Nyo's speed is the fastest." Her body turned into lightning, and in a flash, she appeared far in the distance, and with another flash, she appeared at an even further place. Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui revealed shocked expressions at the same time. Such high speed, even they felt too inferior to bear comparison. The corners of their mouths twitched. Everyone learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, but why was there that much of a difference in speed? "Nyo's a genius!" Hunyo returned within a flash, walking on airs. Ling Han nodded and said, "Your speed really can compare to Shattering Void tier elites, even being that much faster." "Then Nyo's going." Hunyo wasn't afraid of that Flea King at all. Ling Han thought over it again, and said, "After you steer clear of that large guy, we'll meet up 5,000 meters ahead from here." "Okay," Hunyo answered crisply, and shot out with a shio, stopping in front of the Flea King. She said in a loud voice, "Stinky guy, come catch Nyo." The Flea King simply looked at her casually, and then retracted its gaze as if it were sleeping soundly, too lazy to pay attention to this ant. Hunyo was furious to dare ignore someone so cute like her. She picked up a crimson rock and covered her small body completely. She let out a loud roar, and the rock was immediately bound with lightning. Shio, this rock shot rapidly like a cannonball towards the Flea King. Pa! Before the rock hit, the Flea King's terrifying aura shattered the rock. After reaching such a height, even a sliver of aura could shatter stars. However, the large guy was finally infuriated, and couldn't help but lift its body, glaring towards Hunyo. It immediately discovered gloomily that the ant was exactly at the distance where its attack would weaken, and releasing an attack wouldn't be fatal. It was extremely lazy, and immediately lay to sleep. It was just an ant anyway, it couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it. Shio, 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 Hunyo threw rocks in rapid succession. The Flea King lifting its aura could shatter the rocks, but there was also the power of lightning created by the thunderclap ninth heaven in them, so even the Flea King felt its body become somewhat numb. This was far from being able to hurt it, yet it made it very, very out of sorts. Finally, after Hunyo threw over a dozen rocks, the Flea King was in a towering rage. This king doesn't unleash own might, and you really think you can act rampantly on top of this flea's head? He roared explosively, and the sound waves turned into ripples that spread towards the surroundings. Pa 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 pa, the rocks in the surroundings were all shattered, an extremely terrifying thing. Ha ha ha, want to hurt Nyo? Big stinky bug, you're far from it! Hunyo made a face and immediately leapt away. The Flea King finally rose up and charged towards Hunyo. Ling Han immediately charged towards the true dragon's Bloodstone, but once he moved, he discovered that the Flea King had entrenched itself here for a long time, and its shattering void tear aura was almost corporeal. He immediately felt that the air was like sabers as he moved, tearing open his skin. Ling Han! Helian Sun Shui hurriedly held on to him. Ling Han shook his head and said, You head in the Black Tower first, I'll go alone. But Helian Sun Shui was obviously worried. Time to breastfeed our son, you flat chest! Ling Han grabbed Helian Sun Shui and shoved her into the Black Tower. He unleashed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. It obviously couldn't resist against the Flea King, but to contend against the aura that the Flea King had left was not a problem. Everyone was in the shattering void too, though there was a gap. It wasn't large to that degree. The dragon appeared, settling in the sky above Ling Han. He brought the formation forward, but immediately discovered that the formation was to no avail in negating the shattering void tear's aura. Fuck! Ling Han could only store away the formation's eyes and walk forward alone. Pa pa pa! His skin immediately burst with blood, and his blood vessels were also crushed under such pressure. He hurriedly operated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and under the blessing of this ancient and miraculous art, his condition instantly became a lot better. However, he still had to continue forward, and the aura in front was even more terrifying. After walking for another stretch, his bones resounded as if they were breaking. This is a good test, Ling Han said inwardly. He was most adept in turning tribulations into fortuitous encounters. Under such immense pressure, the Sword Heart that he was a sliver away from might be able to break out of its cocoon. Sword Heart was of the shattering void tier level, and if he could cultivate out Sword Heart, it would be easy to resist against shattering void tier aura. He advanced resolutely step by step, with blood bursting all over his body, but his gaze became brighter and brighter as something in his body was in the process of being born. Chapter 803 Finally Comprehending Sword Heart. Chapter 803 Finally Comprehending Sword Heart. In Ling Han's previous fight with Xianyu Ziyuan, Xianyu Ziyuan's martial intent entered his body in the end, and he resisted against it for 1 entire month before wearing it away. This allowed him to touch a slight edge of Sword Heart, but this last step could take several days to cross, or several years, several tens of years, several hundreds of years, or even remain unaccomplished in his entire lifetime. The comprehension of Tao was just that mysterious. The saying, to cover 90% of one's destined distance, brought the traveler no farther than the midway point, meant that before succeeding, it was no different from treading in the same place. Now, the Flea King's aura was even more terrifying. It was at the level of the 15-eyed Corpse King, and in a head-on confrontation, the Flea King could kill Ling Han several hundred times with a single breath. But now, he was only to resist the shattering void tier presence, which was obviously a different matter. This was a contest of martial arts level. Although Ling Han's tier was much lower, he almost cultivated out Sword Heart, which was where his confidence came. Break out of the cocoon to become a butterfly, come out, Sword Heart, Ling Han said inwardly, but it always fell short a tiny bit, driving him mad. Pooh! He was hacking out blood in his mouth. Under the shattering void tier presence's suppression, even he would be heavily injured. On the outside, which shattering void tier elite didn't intentionally curb their presence? If they unleashed it recklessly, then except for those that were also at the shattering void tier, the others would all be killed. Even heaven tier warriors couldn't endure such presence at a close range for a long time. Pa pa pa, the bones all over Ling Han's body shattered, and his entire person distorted under the presence's oppressiveness. Now, he was 10 meters tall, but his body was thin and fragile, looking extremely weird. He was about to die. An enlightenment flashed across Ling Han's mind as he hurriedly dissolved 1 drop of indestructible true fluid, and his body immediately recovered. Even the shattering void tier presence couldn't stop it. However, the good sight didn't last long. After the drop of indestructible true fluid's essence fully dissolved, his body started to break down again. How come he hadn't comprehended Sword Heart yet? Ling Han suddenly realized that he was rushing it. How could martial arts be comprehended by rushing? More haste, less speed walked down the wrong path. It was no wonder under the oppressive presence of a shattering void tier elite, who wouldn't be rushed. He relaxed his mind, and no longer deliberately pursued Sword Heart, instead focusing on resisting the pressure. His body still had large amounts of wounds tearing open, making him look as if he'd killed thousands of people, bathing in blood and becoming a demon. Step by step, Ling Han's steps became firm. Blood was flowing, and sweat was flowing, but his gaze burned brightly as an unyieldingness arose within. Even without having learned Sword Heart, he could still rely on himself to resist the shattering void tier presence. At worst, he would be riddled with scars, but what was it to martial artists to get hurt a little? He advanced with large strides, getting closer and closer to that true dragon's bloodstone. Finally, he touched it. Joy arose within his heart, and at this moment, he felt some sort of shackles being broken within his body, an indescribable feeling rushing to his mind, an endless sword intent surging in his mind. Sword Heart. He was first taken aback before coming to realize it. When he took the last step, his spirit also completed a transformation, crossing the one last step into Sword Heart. He had an enlightenment. Some truths couldn't be deliberately pursued. The naturalness of truth coming naturally was in accordance with Tao. As he thought of those things, his movements weren't slow either as he pressed his hand on the true dragon's bloodstone. Although it was ridiculously large, after cultivating out Sword Heart, his divine sense was like it had been remolded, becoming extremely tough. It spread open like a fish net and enveloped the true dragon's bloodstone, storing it into the Black Tower. It was done! He turned around and started to leave the place of the oppressive presence. At this moment, he no longer felt strain. With Sword Heart's protection, his divine sense was stable. Even the damage of shattering void tier presence was pathetically little to him. He was still injured because he had just cultivated out Sword Heart, not even having initial mastery, let alone Sword Heart illumination. After a while, he finally walked out of this area, and Diamond Body exhibited its powers as the broken bones and shattered skin instantly healed. He then took out a set of clothes from the Black Tower and changed into them, looking like he hadn't been hurt a tiny bit. Hand over the true dragon's bloodstone, and I can spare your life. But at this moment, 5 youngsters walked out from behind a few crimson rocks, staring at him with a murderous look. What? He actually didn't notice them. Ling Han was startled, and couldn't help but reflect on how he neglected the surrounding environment on the way back when he constantly tried to fathom the wonderful uses of Sword Heart. Besides, there indeed was a great limit on the divine sense here, making him fail to notice the presence of the 5 people. If they were on the level of Su Xiuran and had suddenly launched a fatal attack, even he'd probably be in a flurry? He'd been careless and neglectful. In the future, he had to maintain vigilance at all times, or else it was possible to die because of some petty details so long as there was a day that you didn't reach the peak of martial arts. Seeing that Ling Han dared to ignore them, the 5 people were all greatly furious. A man in an embroidered gown shouted, "Human, I'm talking to you!" Ling Han withdrew his thoughts, and said indifferently, "True dragon's bloodstone is what I obtained. Why should I hand it over to you guys? Want it? Find it yourselves. I'm in quite a good mood right now, you guys had better not ruin it." Ha ha! That youngster in the embroidered gown laughed loudly. "How funny! A mere human dares to be impudent! Do you know who we are?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I obviously know." Those 5 people couldn't help but look proud. Even a human knew of their fame. How impressive. However, Ling Han's next words made their faces twitch and reveal furious expressions. Because Ling Han pointed at them and said one by one, "You're a cat, you're a dog, you're a cow, you're a pig, and you're a sheep." The youngster in the embroidered gown shouted fiercely, "I am Mo Yuanming, West CMO royal family's genius." "Oh, so you're called Mo Yuanming, I know, doggo." Ling Han nodded, following on smoothly. A man in purple clothing snorted and said, "Cut the crap with him, let's kill him and seize the true dragon's bloodstone." "Yes, royal brother Jing Xinhuang." The other 4 people obeyed him strictly. Although they were all well-known figures in Mo family's younger generation, none of them could compare to Mo Jingxin. He was a super genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years or even millennia, having pure ancestral blood, and being one of the 3 great kings in the North Sea, one having the possibility to advance to the Shattering Void tier before 50 years old. Mo Yuanming and 3 others surrounded him, while Mo Jingxin stood with his hands behind his back, feeling it beneath him to attack. The sea race was proud, and as they saw it, 4 of them joining hands to fight one human was already thinking too highly of him. After all, the presence Ling Han revealed was only in the deity transformation tier, while there was a heaven tier warrior amongst the 4 people. The last chance, hand over the true dragon's bloodstone or else die. Chapter 804 Mo Family's Genius. Chapter 804 Mo Family's Genius. "I can't be bothered to talk to you guys." Ling Han, however, initiated the attack, forming a seal with his right hand and releasing it towards the 4 people. Golden light instantly radiated all around. It was the earth overturning seal, a mystical power. That large Flea could return at any time, and he didn't want to stay here any longer. After all, he cultivated out Sword Heart, and could resist against Shattering Void Tier's oppressive power, but it didn't mean that he could rival Shattering Void Tier, especially a being like the Flea King. Perhaps even the Lunar King and the likes would get a headache facing it. Outrageous! Mo Yuanming and the others all snorted. A mere deity transformation tier human dared to attack them? They raised their weapons one after another, hacking, slashing, smashing, and thrusting towards Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but itch to try. Sword Heart's miraculous use was to control the weapons of the world, so those who were called Sword King, Saber King, or Fist King all grasped the heart of martial arts. It was as if sitting on a throne, being able to command the world. He extended his left hand and grabbed lightly, and instantly, the weapons in Mo Yuanming's and 3 others' hands all let out a gentle sound and started to tremble lightly as if they were about to escape their grasp and fly towards Ling Han. Mo Yuanming and the 3 others were greatly shocked. What was happening? They retreated repeatedly and held tightly onto their weapons, fearing that they really would fly away. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He just cultivated out Sword Heart, so it wasn't strong enough yet. Otherwise, all those weapons should fly to his side with a single thought, like Imperial bodyguards protecting him. This made him anticipate things even more. How awesome would it be to have great mastery in Sword Heart? And Sword Heart Illumination represented the highest tier in Sword Path, claiming to cut all things, even extinguishing inner demons, or else how would there be illumination in its name? Sword Heart! Mo Jingxin said in a low voice, a cautious look flashing across his face. What, Sword Heart? Impossible, this human's only in the deity transformation tier, how could he have comprehended Sword Heart? Yeah, even Shattering Void tier powerhouses might not have comprehended Sword Heart, how's this human worthy of such an honor? Mo Yuanming and the 3 others couldn't believe it. In their perception, the heart of martial arts only belonged to the Shattering Void tier, and a very small minority of them at that. Definitely not every Shattering Void tier elite had the heart of martial arts. Mo Jing had a stern expression as he said, "You guys remember Su Xiuran and Zhang Mo who were with us?" Obviously. Mo Yuanming and the 3 others all nodded. Those 4 were guests that the Sea Emperor had personally received, and despite them being lowly humans, they didn't dare to underestimate them at all. These 2 people also cultivated out Saber Heart and Sword Heart, and grasped it more deeply than this human, Mo Jingxin said. What? Mo Yuanming and the 3 others were shocked, covered in goosebumps. Were humans really an extremely lowly race? Those 3 people didn't even reach the Shattering Void tier, yet they grasped the heart of martial arts that the majority of the Shattering Void tier elites didn't possess. With that comparison, why did it feel like the sea race was the lower level? Mo Jingxin, however, sighed inwardly. The sea race had the absolute advantage in the cultivation of tears, and with the blessing of dragon's blood, their physiques far surpassed humans. However, with regards to martial arts comprehension, humans were a notch better. In other words, their bloodline was the reason for their success, but also the reason for their failure. However, he immediately retracted the emotion within, and said indifferently, "Don't care about this now, kill this human, and seize the true dragon's bloodstone." "Yes!" Mo Yuanming and the three others shouted, and surrounded Ling Han again. Ling Han raised his left hand. He was now filled with interest in how Sword Heart operated, continually practicing, and with every passing moment, he discovered that he made progress in the comprehension of the Sword Heart. So what if he grasped Sword Heart? He's just a human after all, and only in the deity transformation tier. Mo Yuanming and the other three attacked, launching attacks toward Ling Han for the second time. Ling Han activated the Sword Heart, and influenced the weapons of Mo Yuanming and the three others. It was as if the spirit tools in their hands were revolting against them, and their attacks had no accuracy at all. Mo Yuanming and the three others were shocked. Without accuracy, how could they keep fighting? If Ling Han were a shattering void tier powerhouse, then so be it, he wouldn't win anyway, but now the opponent was just at the deity transformation tier, yet was making them so helpless. Truly an embarrassing thing. Ah! They were driven mad. Ling Han didn't even dodge once and let them attack at will, but they couldn't even touch the corner of Ling Han's clothes. How could they endure this? The heart of martial arts, was it really that powerful? Ling Han soon lost interest. These four people were too weak, and had limited use in helping him improve his Sword Heart. He probably had to fight hand to hand with Su Xiao-ran and the Small Sword Emperor, using their saber or sword heart to improve so that his own sword heart could grow rapidly. His pressed forward with his right hand. The earth-overturning seal shone with golden light, pa 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 pa, sending Mo Yuanming and the three others flying. Wah! Mo Yuanming and the three others hacked out blood violently, suffering heavy injuries under Ling Han's attack. Good-for-nothings! Mo Jingxin said coldly, disdain written all across his face. They couldn't even take care of a human in the deity transformation tier, so what were they if not good-for-nothings? Ling Han took a glance at him with a smile, and said, "You say it like you're not a good-for-nothing yourself." "I'm obviously not a good-for-nothing," Mo Jingxin said in all seriousness. "Whether or not you're a good-for-nothing isn't decided by words alone." Ling Han beckoned him with his finger. "Come, let me beat you till you're convinced, letting you know that you yourself are a good-for-nothing as well." "Is that possible?" Mo Jingxin shook his hands, turning them into dragon claws. "You cultivated out the heart of martial arts, controlling the weapons in the world, but my weapon is my transformed body. Can you influence it?" Ling Han looked at him a few more times and said, "You seem to be quite confident in yourself." "Obviously, I'm from West Sea's Mo family's most outstanding generation, only 27 years old now, yet already at the 9th layer of the Heaven tier, and only one step away from the Shattering Void tier," Mo Jingxin said proudly. This indeed was impressive, enough to take pride in. This one step possibly might not even be crossed in your entire life. Relying on bloodline, and limited by bloodline, accomplishments are destined to be limited if you're unable to walk your own path, Ling Han said with a smile. "Talk is cheap, a mere human dares to brag without shame." Mo Jingxin attacked, arriving before Ling Han in a single stride, reaching out with his right clawed hand, and attacking straight at Ling Han's face. If this attack were to hit firmly, then with the dragon claw's sharpness, even Ling Han's body would be heavily injured. Ling Han reached out with his hand and grabbed at the dragon claw. "How dare you! You seek death!" Mo Yuanming and the three others snorted. Dragon claws were such a supreme weapon, yet you dared try to take it head on. You really didn't know how to write the word death. "Pa!" Ling Han grabbed the dragon claws, a faint golden light emitting from his left hand. It was the diamond body. He caught it, as steady as a great rock. How could that be? Mo Yuanming and the three others' eyes almost popped out. How could this happen? For a human to grab onto a dragon claw with his bare palm Was there still natural order? Was there still the law of the land? Fuck. Chapter 805 Fighting at Close Quarters. Chapter 805 Fighting at Close Quarters. Even Mo Jingxin was emotionally moved. He found that the opponent's hand was as hard as metal. It wouldn't break, or get injured even when scratched by dragon claws. This was too frightening. However, you are just a human. Are you certain you want to have a close battle with the sea race, especially a ruler of the sea race? It was necessary to know that the strength of the human race was their comprehension of the martial arts. Setting apart and bolstering the technique and skill were considered as the way of the king, but close combat was considered to be in the domain of body cultivators. As it happened, due to the rulers of the sea race having control of dragon's blood, each one of them were body cultivators, and their physical bodies were incomparably tough. In a close-range battle, you don't have impressive physical strength. How long would it take to launch a palm strike? In that little time, I could have launched a few hundred attacks and smashed you to bits. And Mo Jingxin snorted, while his other hand grabbed onto Ling Han. This strike was fast, accurate, and merciless. In such a short distance between them, how was Ling Han able to counter it? If the distance was farther, then with just a lift of his hand, the origin power that burst out would shoot out. It would be fine even if the speed was slower. I could still move my arm faster than your attack would be able to cross that distance. But now, just as your hand was lifted up, my dragon claw has struck and is about to snap off your neck. A cruel smile formed on the corner of Mo Jingxin's lips. In this one strike, a talented genius of the human race was about to die. This made him feel extremely satisfied in his heart. Where was the thrill in killing ordinary people? The satisfaction in killing 1,000 or 10,000 of them couldn't be compared with killing one genius. However, he suddenly realized that Ling Han had extended his right hand and grabbed onto his dragon claw again. How could this be? Earlier, he went through a process of charging towards Ling Han. Notwithstanding that, Ling Han had moved back, and there was a small buffer of time, so it was understandable that he had grasped onto his hands. But now, could it be that this human also possessed amazing physical strength? Otherwise, how could he react so quickly? Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "Initially, I still had some appreciation for your capabilities. In the future, you'd be able to provide some contribution in the event of any major disaster. However, you insist on seeking death, so I have no choice but to fulfill your wishes. I admit that I have underestimated you, but you want to kill me? Dream on!" Mo Jingxin sneered, and suddenly aimed a flying kick towards Ling Han. Ling Han lifted his leg to counter the attack. Ping, ping, ping. Both their legs were unceasingly kicking at the other party because both their hands were mutually in each other's grasp. Every strike of their legs wasn't allowed to yield, and thus mutually landed solidly on the other. The sea race had an advantage in physique. The body of Mo Jingxin was comparable to level 9 precious metal, but Ling Han wasn't weak, either, and had also reached this level. Theoretically, the match between the two ought to be a tie. But a tie didn't mean that neither of them would be injured. On the contrary, with the impact of every kick, severe injuries were sustained. Both their legs had already become deformed in between hits. This was akin to an incomparably powerful sword capable of crushing any obstacle. If two such swords were to collide with each other, both of them would be battered or even broken apart. The case now was that both of their legs had been twisted, and the degree of distortion was a bit scary, but they still continued to launch kicks towards each other. In this fight, both pledged their all in a stretch of a single breath. If either one of them couldn't hold on, then what would be kicked wasn't the leg, but the vital part of the lower abdomen. If the dantian was smashed, then wouldn't one be crippled? Mo Jingxin felt secretly regretful. At this point, there was no chance to use any spirit tool or decree. The arms of both parties were holding onto each other. It was impossible to retrieve either. He was a descendant of the Mo clan. He had brought with him several powerful treasures. Each one was enough to kill Ling Han, but now not one of them could be used. How could he not regret it? But who asked him to bully Ling Han being human and want to have a close-range battle with him, intending to crush him in a single exchange. However, he had not expected to encounter such a formidable opponent. Ling Han laughed and said, "You regret it? Ha! Why should I regret it? Do you think that your situation is better than mine?" And Mo Jingxin wasn't willing to show any weakness. "It's really better than yours." Ling Han circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his fractured thighs immediately returned to normal. "What?" And Mo Jingxin was shocked. "What the fuck is this resilience? Are you really human? Are you sure that you aren't a monster? What about now?" Ling Han again sent over a flying kick. "Ah!" And Mo Jingxin suddenly screamed. Although there wasn't any increase in this kick's power, he felt he had received a hard hit upon impact. This was due to a psychological effect. He was badly hit, but Ling Han was completely healed. Such contrast naturally caused him to fall apart mentally and to feel a strong sense of frustration. As a descendant of the true dragon, he had unexpectedly lost to a human in terms of physique. Ling Han did not show any mercy, and launched his kicks even more rapidly. Pung, 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 pung. Once Mo Jingxin's fighting spirit began to waver, he naturally couldn't continue with the same manner of speech. Suddenly, he was being furiously kicked by Ling Han. Ping! He couldn't get a hold of Ling Han again, and was sent flying by his kicks. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, and a huge part of his lower abdomen had become concave. It appeared a ghastly sight. And Mo Jingxin scrambled up with great difficulty. Gasping, he exhaled a breath of air before calming down a little. He then drew out a rolled scroll. Shattering Void Tear Decree. "You are very strong, but so what?" he sneered. "In front of the battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tear, you are insignificant just like an ant. Die!" He suddenly opened up the decree, unleashing a powerful pressure that made the four people including Mo Yuanming involuntarily kneel down as their skin split and flesh ruptured. It was as if a Shattering Void Tear elite had arrived in person, but it wasn't just the imposing manner. Even if they were rulers of martial arts, their bodies nevertheless still crumbled. Ling Han gave a light smile. With a wave of his right hand, 108 daggers suddenly appeared and formed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Immediately, an Ice Dragon materialized, facing towards the sky, and gave a thundering roar. "Go!" As Ling Han held out his hand and pointed with a finger, the Ice Dragon rushed with killing intent towards Mo Jingxin. The decree had just been opened when a burly man came out, exuding the powerful aura of the Shattering Void Tear. He saw the oncoming attack of the Ice Dragon, and immediately went up to meet it. Pung, 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 the two sides fought, and the battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tear instantly crushed all the surrounding mountain rocks to pieces. If it was not for this place being the ghostly dragon cave, the stars in the world would be out of luck again. Who knew how many will be crushed? That man was being suppressed. What? The group of five, including Mo Jingxin, all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. This was their biggest trump card. In this ghostly dragon cave which Shattering Void Tear elites couldn't enter, wouldn't a Shattering Void Tear decree be amazing enough? But now, he was being completely suppressed by one side. Ling Han understood it clearly in his heart. How strong could the strength sealed in a decree be? Due to the double restriction of the maker and the materials of the decree itself, it was already very remarkable to be able to achieve battle prowess surpassing 5 stars. In the Shattering Void Tear, 1 star was the difference between heaven and earth, not to mention 2 stars or more. With a roar from the Ice Dragon, the decree was torn to pieces. "No!" And Mo Jingxin screamed, but was strangled to death by the Ice Dragon without any doubt. Ling Han was going for the kill. He just wanted to kill the group of 4 including Mo Yuanming, but he was shocked when he saw that the Flea King was flying back in a distance away with the astonishing speed of a bullet. When the big guy saw that the true dragon Bloodstone had disappeared, he would definitely flip out. He'd better retreat. Ling Han also couldn't be bothered with taking action against the 4 people including Mo Yuanming. They were of no importance in his eyes, anyway. He leaped up, and in a flash, disappeared into the distance. Chapter 806 Barge Through. Chapter 806 Barge Through. Ling Han rushed to the place which had been agreed upon with Hu Niu. Upon arriving, he saw that the little girl had arrived long ago, and was sitting on the stone waving her legs, appearing bored, her small lips pouting in a very unhappy expression. After discovering that Ling Han had come over, she groaned, and said, "Ling Han, you are too slow. You've made Niu waited for so long." Sorry. Ling Han quickly smiled, and said, "Niu has really done me a huge favor this time." Hu Niu immediately became extremely pleased. Clapping her hands, she said, "Niu is the best. Niu really is the best." Ling Han patted Hu Niu's head. This little girl was indeed very special. "Let's take a look at the harvest first." Ling Han and Hu Niu entered the Black Tower together. He then called Helian Sun Shui over. She was holding Ling Jian Shui, and they both came together before the huge true dragon Bloodstone. Iya! Ling Jian Shui wriggled his little hands and feet, trying hard to break out from within Helian Sun Shui's arms. "Oh?" Ling Han was stunned. Did this little guy feel the power of the true dragon Bloodstone? He paused for a while and said, "Sun Shui, let go of him and we shall see." Naturally, it would be impossible to have any problems within the Black Tower. Accordingly, Helian Sun Shui put her son on the ground. The little guy immediately used both his hands and feet, and charged towards the true dragon Bloodstone. Although he hadn't reached age of 1 year yet, his brute strength and speed were incomparably impressive. Very quickly, he ran to the front of the true dragon Bloodstone and climbed up on it one step at a time. When he reached the peak, he comfortably lay face down on top of its surface, just like the Flea King previously. Ling Han immediately noticed that on the little guy's body, there were flickering streaks of draconic patterns, emitting a faint radiance. There was outpouring of dragon's might. Moreover, it was consistently getting stronger. He'd absorb the true dragon's blood, and keep getting stronger. For the descendants of the true dragon's blood was definitely a rare treasure, and perhaps even something irreplaceable. Ling Han walked over and put his hand on the true dragon Bloodstone. Immediately, the 9 dragons' tyrant body art automatically circulated to extract the essence of the Bloodstone, strengthening his body and enhancing his physique slightly, with a substantial increase in strength. He has a sudden urge to completely draw out the energy within the Bloodstone, and let his brute force instantly soar upwards into heaven tier, or even stronger. He promptly restrained himself. It wouldn't be a good thing for strength to increase too rapidly. One would need to have a strong enough mental state to control such power. Despite being of the heaven tier in his past life, his battle prowess wasn't strong at all, and the past he might not even be a match for the current him now. He didn't have an edge in mental state. It could be said that in addition to striving forward on the familiar road towards the heaven tier, he had completely surpassed his previous life, and this time it was only within a span of just over 5 years. When he thought about this, it made him feel as though he was in a dream. After reaching the peak of the deity transformation tier, it was necessary to build a solid foundation in that state before breaking through. He couldn't leave any regret, otherwise it might bring about a huge impact. Ling Han retracted his hand and said, "Small tower, how will this kid absorb the true dragon's blood? Will there be any problem?" The small tower emerged, and calmly replied, "His physique is good, much stronger than yours. You'd better die soon. That way, your son will inherit the Black Tower, and definitely be more outstanding than you." Fuck. The corner of Ling Han's lips twitched. "Even though you were praising my son, you need not belittle me so much, right? This proud tower. One day, I will make it kneel down and proclaim its defeat. However, it's good if there's no problem. Just let this kid lie on top of the stone to absorb the true dragon's blood. I really don't know what kind of height his brute force can reach once he has activated his spirit base. Flower blossom tier? Spiritual infant tier?" 3 people including Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. The most precious treasure was of course the true dragon's tooth. By comparison, the others were just sesame seeds. Even the true dragon Bloodstone could only be regarded as a slightly larger sesame seed. Arg! Just as they exited the Black Tower, they heard a terrible roar, which completely shook them to the point that their skin was undulating like waves. It was that Flea King. It came back, only to discover that the true dragon Bloodstone wasn't there. It naturally blew its top off, and bellowed so violently as if it wanted to destroy this part of the realm. "Let's go!" The three, including Ling Han, left at once. To resolutely take on this 15-eyed corpse king-level Flea King was simply courting death. Only a fool would do such a thing. After running for over 100 miles, although the roars could still be heard, the ripples in the air finally could not affect them anymore. This was precisely what a shattering void tier elite was. With just a roar, it could cause shock injury to a heaven tier elite. After running for several hundred miles more, the roars finally disappeared completely, and the three people sighed in relief. Fortunately, this big guy did not pursue them and attack everywhere. Otherwise, if they were targeted, would they be able to stand up to it even if they managed to awaken the Revere Life Sword? They no longer deliberately searched for other treasures, be it true dragon bloodstone or the dragon's blood grass. Now they were focused on the true dragon's tooth. After all, they didn't know how much time they would spend on the 4th floor. 2 days later, they came to the end of the 3rd floor. Here, there wasn't any passageway or tall mountain made of bones. There was only a seemingly ordinary portal, but it was connected to a completely different world, and the opposite side was an ocean of flames. "Hee, finally I've waited until you came!" Amidst the cold sneer, Su Xiu-Ran's group of 4 could be seen appearing one after the other, blocking the passageway to the portal. Ling Han smiled and said, "To have made all of you wait so long, I am truly sorry. It doesn't matter, you can compensate us with your life," the small sword emperor said coldly. "Then I am even more sorry, as I value my life very much, and have no intention of using it to compensate anyone." Ling Han gazed at the 4 people coldly. With his own strength, he wasn't afraid of these 4 people. Even if his battle prowess fell short of theirs, his body could continuously heal, making him the person with the last laugh. However, everyone had the ability to fight a stronger opponent. With the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, they would probably need to get the Flea King from earlier to come over to be equally matched. He immediately made a decision. He was going to rush forward and first get his hands on the true dragon's tooth. As for the 4 people, they could be dealt with later. Die! Su Xiu-Ran immediately wielded absolute saber, while Son of Lightning also took out the mountain and river axe. Held high in his hands, this treasured tool had been awakened, exuding an incomparably overbearing aura. Ling Han pulled Helian Sun Shui and Hunyo back into the Black Tower. Anyway, the other 4 people already knew that he had a spatial divine tool, so it didn't matter if he used it in front of them. "You want to barge through us? You are too naive!" The small sword emperor sneered, and also wielded a treasured sword. With the circulation of the sword's intent, this treasured tool was awakened, exuding a fierce breath. Even if it did not reach the shattering void tier, it wouldn't be far off. Dong Linger also wielded a sword. She hadn't mastered sword art yet, but she also possessed her own formidable power. The power within her blood was unleashed, and at her back, 2 long wings spread out, together with a phoenix tail woven with light and shadow. It was like she had become a colorful phoenix. The 4 young rulers joined forces to stop Ling Han. In addition to the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, it could be said that they made a well-fortified barricade. Even for shattering void tier, there wasn't more than a few capable of charging through their ranks. Ling Han drew out the Revere Life Sword, and smiled. "Then I will show you!" Chapter 807 Trap. Chapter 807 Trap. Without hesitation, Ling Han shot out, directly heading for the passage that led to the 4th floor. As long as he entered, Su Xiu-Ran and the others would naturally be unable to follow. The Revere Life Sword, due to the proximity of the aura of the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe, automatically awakened. Its patterns glowed, and its killing intent blazed into the skies. Ling Han did not summon the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. His intention now was to barge his way in, and not defeat these 4 people. The difficulty level was completely different. How could it be that the Revere Life Sword would be unable to sustain a single combined strike of the Absolute Saber and the mountain and river axe. You had to be kidding. Get back! The 4 young elites combined their attacks, and even used such powerful killing tools like the Absolute Saber and the mountain and river axe. Even shattering void tier elites were practically unable to outshine them. Yet Ling Han forced his way through. The Revere Life Sword exuded endless light from its patterns, wrapping him tightly within as he charged towards that doorway. Hong! 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 In the fierce exchange, Ling Han could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, yet forced his way through the combined barricade of the 4 young rulers, and threw himself into that doorway. The moment he entered, he immediately drew out the Flower of Dead Souls. Wang, this amazing flower that came from the netherworld instantly shone with a dark light that suppressed the blazing flames surrounding him. These flames had absolutely no effect on the physical body. Instead, they directly affected the soul, attempting to burn his soul to ashes. And the Flower of Dead Souls just so happened to be capable of suppressing them. As for why it could do so, Ling Han could not fathom it either. He merely knew that the effects were indeed excellent. He turned around yet saw that the expressions on the faces of Su Xiuran and the others looked very odd. They did not look at all defeated that he had managed to barge in, but were rather wearing cold smirks, like they were saying, "You're a stupid idiot. Ling Han, we already know that you have a spatial divine tool, yet still deliberately revealed the use of the Flower of Dead Souls. Could it be that you take us for idiots?" Su Xiuran sneered. Dong Linger continued, "You're wrong. We deliberately said those words for you to hear. The Flower of Dead Souls is the key to enter into the 4th floor, true, but it's merely one of them. The other key is, one has to form the heart of martial arts. Otherwise, you would still be burned to ashes. After you're dead, we will enter and take away the Flower of Dead Souls. Anyways, in your current condition, you would not be able to go far," the small sword emperor said calmly. Ling Han gave an "oh" and smiled. "You all deliberately say it now because you want to detain me here as much as possible. On the other side, you have sealed the exit so that I would only be able to remain here, and you could easily retrieve the Flower of Dead Souls later. Now that I think about it, you all did not try your best to stop me previously. That's right. Using this natural killing zone to eliminate you, wouldn't it be much simpler?" the Son of Lightning said calmly. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Since you all know that I have a spatial divine tool, could it be that you don't know that I merely have to duck inside, and it will not matter how horrible the conditions outside are? What could they do to me? Humph, you think that just because we have never seen a spatial divine tool before, we don't know the use of a spatial divine tool?" Donglinger snorted derisively. "Spatial divine tools are merely convenient, but could not completely seal off the environment. Even if you hide inside, you would not be spared from death." Ling Han grinned and said, "Then even if I died, I would not allow the Flower of Dead Souls or the spatial divine tool to benefit you. You all did not find it previously. That is the case now, and in the future, you would not be able to do it either." Hearing these words, Su Xiuran and the others frowned. This was indeed their worry. They had only heard of the existence of spatial divine tools, but had never seen one before, so how would they know how to retrieve it? Su Xiuran pondered, then said, "Hand over the Flower of Dead Souls and the spatial divine tool, and we can spare you." When he saw Ling Han's uncaring expression, he stretched out his hand and declared, "I can swear." "We can swear too," the others said as well. In comparison with the valuable True Dragon's Tooth and spatial divine tool, Ling Han's life could naturally be set aside for the moment. Anyways, he had not yet become too powerful. There were many elites in the 5 great sects that could easily kill him. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "Do you all not know that I am a person who is unafraid of death? I will not stay around to chat anymore, bye." He turned around and left. This was something that Su Xiuran and the others had not expected. In their opinion, Ling Han was definitely a smart person, and how could it be possible that a smart person would make this kind of choice? This was a situation in which either side won, and the most they would suffer was mild damage. They had merely lost the Flower of Dead Souls, but in Ling Han's case, he would lose his life. No matter how they thought about it, Ling Han did not seem to be the person who is unafraid of death that he had flaunted himself as. Could it be, he has formed Sword Heart? Su Xiuran's expression changed drastically. He had fought with Ling Han the most, and could be considered more familiar with Ling Han's personality than the others. The expressions of the others changed as well. This was not impossible. Previously, Ling Han had already touched the border of the Sword Heart, which allowed him to be unaffected by Su Xiuran and the Small Sword Emperor, and killed Jiang Ming successfully. Any other person would not be able to do so in such a short amount of time, but how could Ling Han be any other person? Then this would be a little terrible. Sword Heart added with the Flower of Dead Souls would be enough to resist the soul-burning flames of the fourth floor, and it would definitely not be difficult for him to obtain the true Dragon's Tooth. And it would be of no use for them to stand guard here either. The moment the time limit was reached, Ling Han would naturally be directly sent out of the ghostly dragon cave. We'll stand guard here. If the time comes and we are still unable to capture Ling Han, we will immediately return to the middle state and ask the ultimate elites to move. We must definitely kill this man. That's right. With the true Dragon's Tooth and a spatial divine tool in his possession, there is definitely a need to get the ultimate elites to move. The four of them all sat at the entrance and waited patiently. In their eyes, there was only one valuable thing in this ghostly dragon cave, and that was the true Dragon's Tooth. Thus, they could not bother to waste time to search for other treasures. Ling Han's hand gripped the Flower of Dead Souls. As he walked in the sea of flames, his steps were steady, and he was extremely calm. Setting aside their ability to burn the soul, the damage that these flames inflicted on the physical body was practically zero. Furthermore, with the protection of the Flower of Dead Souls, and the support of the Sword Heart, he had nothing to fear here. He took great strides forwards. The structure of this fourth floor was very simple. It was merely a large passage all the way to the end. Thus, he had no other choice but to walk forwards. Apparently, the true Dragon's Tooth lay at the end of this passage. However, no one was capable of obtaining it, and they could only look upon it from afar. The passage was very long. After a half-day's time, Ling Han finally saw the end. An altar made of stone appeared ahead of him. It was huge, but there was a ring of purple light that had solidified around and encircled the altar. Until now, no one had been able to pass through this ring of light. Otherwise, if anyone had been able to pass through and come back out, how could it be that they had not been able to retrieve the true Dragon's Tooth? In the middle of the altar, there lay a colossal fang. It was 30 meters long, and was completely brilliant white, seeming like a beautiful work of art. Merely the sight of it gave a kind of pleasant feeling. Moreover, even though he was standing so far away from it, Ling Han could still sense the boundless might emitted by the fang. The True Dragon's Tooth. Chapter 808 True Dragon's Tooth. Chapter 808 True Dragon's Tooth. The true Dragon's Tooth was almost within reach. Ling Han walked forwards. He had already come all this way, so no matter what, he wanted to make an attempt. Even if, at the end, he had to use the Revere Life Sword to slash at it brutally, or even ask Small Tower to move, he wanted to give it a try. The divine item was left behind by a true dragon one. Even in the immortal realm, this was something that would be fought over, wasn't it? When Ling Han walked in front of that purple halo of light, the halo rippled as if it was water, and wrapped around him. He looked down, and saw that the Flower of Dead Souls in his grip was exuding a faint light that seemed to form some kind of echo with this purple halo. Realization dawned on him. If this wasn't the case, then so many people managed to come here before, though they all died eventually. Why was there a need to have the Flower of Dead Souls to be capable of obtaining the true Dragon's Tooth? Because it was not difficult to reach this place. The difficulty lay in how to pass through this purple halo, and the Flower of Dead Souls played the role of a key. How strange! Ling Han frowned, and a feeling of confusion rose in his heart. He did not take it to heart, though. He had already entered the altar, and the next thing he had to do was to merely draw the true Dragon's Tooth into the Black Tower. Then, not even immortals would be able to snatch it away from him if they descended into the lower realm. Wang wang wang. He walked on the altar. Multiple stone bricks glowed, forming some kind of strange pattern that flowed together unendingly as if some kind of mysterious melody was being played, yet it was a soundless performance. He stopped, and a powerful feeling of alert rose in his heart. If there was any danger that he could not cope with, he would enter the Black Tower at the first moment, and definitely not try to be brave. After all, the strongest dragon in the world was buried under this place. He stopped, but the stone bricks were still glowing, fluctuating in brightness, forming some kind of rhythm. A faint aura was circulating, ancient and aged yet powerful as if it had experienced uncountable millennia. This was left behind by that old dragon. Ling Han observed for a moment, and when he discovered that only the stone bricks were glowing in intervals, and no other change was happening, he once again walked forwards. The true dragon's tooth was right in front of him, and there was absolutely no reason for him to give up. Finally, he arrived in front of the true dragon's tooth. He slowly stretched out his hand and pressed down on the true dragon's tooth. Next, he merely had to wrap his divine sense around this dragon fang, and would then be able to take it into the Black Tower. 1. The flower of dead souls in his hand shone brilliantly, yet was also rapidly wilting. One after another, the wilted petals dropped as if its essence had been sucked out, causing it to become dark and lifeless. It no longer had the slightest bit of magic to it anymore. Right at this moment, the true dragon's tooth also exuded blazing light, which was incomparably blinding. Even Ling Han could not stare at it directly, and he hurriedly turned his head and closed his eyes. But there was no slowing down to his movement to draw the true dragon's tooth into the Black Tower. His divine sense had already wrapped fully around the dragon fang. Draw inside. Ling Han's expression changed in spite of himself, realized there was actually no way for him to draw the true dragon's tooth into the Black Tower. How was that possible? There was only one thing that the Black Tower could not take in, and that was an individual possessing sentience. Only if this being did not resist his will would the Black Tower be capable of taking it in. But now this was obviously a dragon fang, so why couldn't he take it in the Black Tower? The dragon fang had its own individual will? Or, in other words, the dragon fang was a divine item, and by nature, could not be taken inside the Black Tower? Ling Han did not understand, but now, he could not open his eyes at all, so there was naturally no way for him to examine what strange thing was happening to this dragon fang. It had not changed in who knew how many millennia, so why had it experienced some kind of unfathomable change the moment he came? The flower of dead souls. Instantly, realization dawned on him. Previously, though many people had come here, none of them had brought the flower of dead souls with them. Only he was the exception, which then triggered some mysterious change in the true dragon's tooth. But what exactly was this change? After at least 15 minutes, the light given off by the true dragon's tooth finally dimmed. Ling Han opened his eyes and saw that the flower of dead souls in his hand had completely wilted, leaving behind only a bare stem. He turned to look at the true dragon's tooth. This colossal fang that was as white as jade was becoming increasingly translucent, and had even become transparent. Although there were tightly woven patterns covering it, it did not prevent him from being able to see inside the true dragon's tooth, where there seemed to be a ball of something. He could not distinguish what exactly it was, though. The patterns were very effective at protection, but he could vaguely see that the ball was moving. This was extremely astonishing. True Dragon's Tooth had been abandoned for who knew how many millennia, but there was actually some kind of life form nurtured inside. It had to be a life form, one that possessed its own will. That was why it could resist being taken in by the Black Tower. The feeling of unease in Ling Han's heart grew increasingly stronger. He kept feeling as if he had fallen into some kind of trap, but it had already gone so far, so he still activated the Eye of Truth, intending to have a clear look. Shock! Ling Han was startled. With the Eye of Truth, he finally had a clear view. That ball of something being nurtured inside the dragon fang was actually a little boy. He looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and was younger than even Hu Niu. He looked quite handsome, and was completely naked, but Ling Han could find no traits on him that declared him a descendant of the dragon race. this dragon tooth was really absurd. In the long passage of time, it actually developed its own will and attained new life? That's not right. Just recall Corpse Boss and Corpse 2. Even though they were revived corpses, they had at least developed from a whole corpse. A dragon tooth could actually nurture out a new life. Wasn't that a little bit too far? Ka. Just as his imagination ran wildly, one crack after another appeared on the dragon tooth. It was as if a spider's web had enveloped the whole fang, and then, with a pang, the whole dragon tooth shattered. Then, a little boy stood on the ground. Ha, I have finally come back to life, this little boy said in a voice filled with childish innocence, yet his tone was old and mature. He cast a look on Ling Han, and could not help but haughtily exclaim, Junior, why are you not kneeling down now that you've seen your ancestor? Ling Han was stunned at first. Where had this monster come from? But then he immediately discovered that this little boy was merely in the body refining tier, so what wariness would he still have? He directly stretched out his hand to grab him. Insolence, to actually dare treat me so rudely! Just see how I shall deal with you, the little boy said angrily. Wang, a terrifying dragon's might exuded from him. It was extremely noble and majestic, and even Xian Yutong and Wen Jia would not be able to stop themselves from kneeling down immediately in face of such pressure. This had nothing to do with cultivation level, but was pure domination of bloodline. But what effect would this dragon's intimidation have on Ling Han? He was not a member of the dragon race, and had already formed Sword Heart. Additionally, he also had the Black Tower inside supporting him, so the thing he feared least was this kind of mental pressure. His hand grabbed out, and the little boy had already fallen into his grasp. Ling Han laughed, raised his large hand and began spanking the little boy's behind. Pa. It immediately caused the little boy to erupt into loud wails, his little face completely red. This was too humiliating. How high was his status, yet he had actually had his behind spanked by a junior. Moreover, it was his bare backside, which made him want to spit out blood in infuriated shame. Junior, stop immediately! Do you know who I am? The little boy screamed loudly as he continued to struggle endlessly. Ling Han's hand did not stop falling as he continued to spank the little boy's behind like mad, and said calmly, If I had not guessed wrongly, you must be that alternative dragon. Chapter 809 Reappearance of the Alternative Dragon. Chapter 809 Reappearance of the Alternative Dragon. The little boy was startled in spite of himself, and asked, Why would you make such a guess? Fuck, if you weren't that alternative dragon, why would you be able to absorb the essence of the true dragon's tooth? Furthermore, you're acting so mature and old that merely the sight of you would make one think in that direction. Ling Han said with exasperation, but did not continue the spanking either. He casually tossed the little boy over to one side, then threw a piece of clothing over. The little boy slipped it on, but this was Ling Han's clothing, and for him, it was really a little too big, so long that even his hands could no longer be seen, the sleeves dragging onto the floor. He could not help but feel depressed and asked, Is there nothing smaller? Yes, but they're all for girls. Do you want them? Ling Han asked. The little boy hesitated for a moment, then, with a shake of his head, said, I'll just wear this one then. He rolled up the sleeves and trouser legs, but the clothes were too large, so he still looked a bit out of place, causing Ling Han to laugh in spite of himself. Since you already know who I am, and yet you still dared to laugh at me, are you tired of living? The little boy threatened fiercely. Pa! Ling Han delivered a knock to his head, instantly causing the little boy to grab his head in pain. What is it? Have I not beaten you into submission just now? The little boy was confused, and asked, Why are you not affected by my dragon's might? Although I have lost all my cultivation, my dragon's might is still the strongest in the world. Any descendant of the dragon race would be affected by me. Ling Han clicked his tongue and said, Open your damn eyes and look carefully. What part of me looks like the descendant of the dragon race? What, you actually are not a descendant of the dragon race? The little boy's face was filled with disbelief. But I obviously sense the aura of dragon race from you. This was normal. His wife was a member of the dragon race, and his son also had the bloodline of the dragon race. Furthermore, he was also cultivating the 9 dragons tyrant body art, so what was odd about him having a little dragon smell? 1. Ling Han picked up the little boy in a single move and said, I actually forgot to ask you. What are you called again? The little boy worked hard at presenting a serious expression, crossing his arms over his chest, pretending to be reserved. However, Ling Han was holding on to the collar of his shirt, and his body was endlessly wriggling around, which instantly caused this air of utmost seriousness that he was trying to put on to completely vanish. He flew into a rage from the humiliation and said, Even if you are not a descendant of the dragon race, I am your senior by who knows how many years. You need to maintain appropriate respect towards me. Besides, this realm still needs me to come out and save it. A thought streaked through Ling Han's head. In the past, the alternative dragon was incomparably powerful, and even the immortals that descended could not kill him, so he definitely had to know the truth of the reckoning. Now, after passing through endless years and being reborn, he would definitely not be satisfied to die here of old age, completely helpless. The so-called saving, could it also be indicating the splitting open of the skies? He did not ask directly. Instead, he said, Don't think that I don't know. This damn place can only be entered with the flower of dead souls. It must be your trick, and has a definite relation with your rebirth. You have to know, I was the one who brought the flower of dead souls, so I am your benefactor. You still put on the airs of a senior with me? Is it that your backside is itching for another spanking again? Although the flower of dead souls had been brought by Su Xiuran's group, did Ling Han need to explain it so clearly to the alternative dragon? The little boy's aura could not help but weaken. Ling Han was right. The key to his rebirth was the flower of dead souls. This was something that could not be missed, and from this aspect, Ling Han was indeed his savior. He humphed and retorted, Fine, I shall tell you my true name. My surname is Helion, with the name of Tianyun, and I am the strongest dragon of this realm. He was very proud of himself, which caused Ling Han to look down on him in spite of himself. From the looks of it, after he had gotten a new life, this alternative dragon's personality had also undergone a great change. Otherwise, what need was there for an ultimate elite with 20 stars of shattering void tier to be so tsundere? This kind of existence had absolutely no need to seek the approval of others, and would be able to match even the immortals that descended into the lower realm, being powerful to an indescribable level. However, the surname of Helion? Could he be the old ancestor of Helion Rome? Fuck, then he definitely could not let him find out that his wife was Helion Sun Shui. Otherwise, this guy would definitely act tsundere to the death, and put on the airs of an elder in front of him. Ling Han stretched out his hand, a clear threat, before he asked, You have obviously died for who knows how many millennia, so how have you come back to life? Humph, with the powerful existence that I am, what is so strange about me being able to live a second life? Helion Tianyun humphed. Ling Han was naturally not going to believe him. Even in the immortal realm, it was immeasurably difficult to reincarnate a soul, so it was obviously even more difficult here in the lower realm. However, this was their first encounter, so even if he had saved his life, how was it possible that Helion Tianyun would easily reveal his secrets? If you wanted to know the secret of another, you'd have to reveal your own secret. Only then would you be able to win the trust of others. Ling Han asked, You mentioned saving this world. Were you referring to splitting open the skies? Hong! Even if this was the ghostly dragon cave, which could claim to be an independent plane, the moment Ling Han said the words, splitting open the skies, thunder still rang out around them. Helion Tianyun could not help but be stunned, and exclaimed, You monster, you are actually not tolerated by the heavens. No, 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 you have the potential to threaten this world. That is why you were sensed by the world, which wanted to draw out a tribulation of thunder to eliminate you. Ling Han's face darkened in spite of himself. To have an old monster from who knew how many millennia ago point at his face and call him a monster, no matter what, still made him feel awkward. How long have I actually slept that there would actually appear such a strange person in the world? Helion Tianyan grabbed his head and exclaimed, "Wha? And I still wanted to rescue all the life in this world and become the Messiah. But I never thought that my business would be snatched from me. Fuck, why didn't I wake up earlier?" "Restrain your grief," Ling Han said from the side. "No one died in my family, so what grief would I feel?" Helion Tianyan said with irritation. Ling Han was momentarily speechless. Looks like this alternative dragon should have been a joker in the past as well. As the saying went, it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to alter one's character. Even if he had been changed from the experience of obtaining a second life, it was not possible that he would have changed so much. Only if he were a natural joker would he be like this. However, you mentioned splitting open the skies, so you should already know the truth of the reckoning of the immortal realm. Helion Tianyan said, quickly regaining his composure. Ling Han nodded and asked, "In the past, you did not shatter the void and become an immortal. Was it because you discovered the sky-sealing great formation?" "That's right. Initially, I thought that after I cultivated to the highest degree, it should not be a problem to shatter the void. Unexpectedly, I was still not a match." Helion Tianyan sighed. "Thankfully, I had an alternative plan. Though I suffered serious injuries at that time, I still managed to escape back here, and died seated here. However, I nurtured a sliver of my divine sense inside the dragon fang to seek life from my death. When I was young, I obtained a divine herb that would allow the soul to undergo a metamorphosis. Thus, I simply hardened my heart, abandoned my original body, and reformed my body with the true dragon's tooth. I have cultivated this fang to the level of a true dragon's, and even in the immortal realm, it would be an awesome treasure. Now, after uncountable years, condensing the essence of the dragon fang into my body, and taking the final step with the help of the flower of dead souls, I have finally come back to life again. At that time, though my body was already very powerful, I was still not strong enough to bear the thoughts of all life of this world, but this time, I will definitely be able to." Chapter 810 Taking a Disciple. Chapter 810 Taking a Disciple. In his last life, Helion Tianyan had wanted to split open the skies, but splitting open the skies would require the establishment of a nation. After all, the power of an individual was limited, while this realm did not meet the conditions for letting someone become immortal. Without the support of power of the nation, no one's power would be strong to the level of being able to split open the skies. Even immortals could not do so. Releasing extreme amounts of power would only cause them to be repelled by the world. But it was a different case with the support of power of the nation because the original cultivation level had not exceeded the world's limit. The world also had rules that it needed to follow, otherwise, splitting open the skies would only be empty words. But using the power of the nation as support by itself put a massive burden on an individual, so how could it be done without a physique strong enough? Even with the sturdiness and strength of physique of a member of the dragon race, and the power of the alternative dragon at that time, he still had not chosen to split open the skies. That was because he knew that it was not possible for him to bear the power of the nation formed by the combined thoughts of all life in this realm. In this life, Helion Tianyan used the true dragon's tooth to reform his body. Then, when he once again cultivated back to the shattering void tier, his physique would naturally be even stronger. Perhaps, he would then really be capable of withstanding the combined thoughts of all life on this realm. However, now that there is a monster like you, I can be more relaxed, and there is no need for me to take the responsibility of splitting open the skies onto my shoulders. Helion Tianyan laughed. Even the world moved because of you, which clearly indicated that the chance of you succeeding is incomparably high. Ling Han pondered, then replied, "You are really lucky that you managed to wait until the arrival of the flower of dead souls. This thing is an item of the netherworld. Perhaps, in a whole lifetime, it would never come to you. I don't believe that this true dragon's tooth can allow your soul to be preserved eternally. That's why I said I am a very fortunate person. It was destined that I would be able to come back to life." Helion Tianyan said, smiling. "Then you plan to help me?" Ling Han questioned. Naturally. Even if I live another life, I still do not have the confidence of breaking through that sky-sealing great formation, so I can only place my hopes on splitting open the skies, Hellion Tianyan said. When he spoke of the sky-sealing great formation, he could not help but shiver. At the time, it caused him to suffer tremendous injury, and he had almost died, so he naturally still had lingering fear. Ling Han laughed, and retorted, "You are only in the body refining tier presently, so what can you help me with? My current body is nurtured from the true dragon's tooth, and added with the fact that I had reached the human apex in my last life, I will be walking on an old path in this life, so there will not be the slightest bottleneck. You merely need to give me a few years' time, as well as enough resources for cultivation. How difficult would it be for me to return to the peak? Moreover, my dragon's might is only stronger than it was before. Whatever dragon, in front of me, can only bow down obediently in submission," Hellion Tianyan declared proudly. This effect was indeed quite useful. If Hellion Tianyan could conquer the seas, with him and Ma Duobao on land, then both sides would need only combine their respective territories when the time came, so wouldn't the whole realm be settled? Not bad, not bad. Although he had been scammed by the alternative dragon once, he did still get something out of it. Ling Han turned to look and said, "However, the flower of dead souls has been absorbed by you, so how should we leave? Stupid, this place has been formed from my body, and is used to protect my soul. I used the true dragon's tooth to attract others to bring the flower of dead souls here. Now that I was reborn, there is naturally no need for this place to exist anymore," Hellion Tianyan replied disdainfully. True, though his current abilities were so weak that a single finger would be able to push him over, it did not change the fact that he had once been an alternative dragon. Ling Han hesitated, then said, "I'll introduce you to a few people." "Yeah?" Hellion Tianyan appeared very astonished. "There was not even a soul around here, so how were you going to introduce me to a few people?" But he had barely finished the town, when he saw a few extra people appear suddenly around him. This gave him a scare. Then, he said in absolute shock, "Spatial divine tool! An actual spatial divine tool! This brat is indeed loved by the fate, actually being able to get his hands on a spatial god tool." His eyes swept over, and he could not hold back as he said, "These are descendants of the dragon race, I can smell it on them," he said, pointing at Hellion Sun Shui and Ling Jian Shui. Meanwhile, Hellion Sun Shui stared at Ling Han questioningly, and asked, "Who is this kid?" "Your ancestor," Hellion Tianyan said in a very aged manner. Hellion Sun Shui was naturally not going to believe him. This tiny kid actually dared to take advantage of her? She immediately aimed her hand to knock his head. However, her hand had just stretched out when a supreme dragon's might exuded from him, causing her delicate body to instantly weaken. Her legs could not even support her body properly anymore, and she collapsed backwards. Ling Han stretched out his arms and caught her in his embrace. Ling Jian Shui, meanwhile, was furious. Although the little guy was only half a year old, his intelligence could not be measured with normal standards. He immediately jumped out of Hellion Sun Shui's arms, crouched on the ground, and directly howled at Hellion Tianyan. Hellion Tianyan was stunned. "This little babe has a very dense true dragon bloodline to actually be capable of matching my dragon's might. Aya!" He emitted a terrible scream. That was because Ling Jian Shui had already shot over, and gave him a direct punch to the fact, causing him to fall onto the ground. Although he had once been an alternative dragon, and his dragon's might was indeed terrifying, in terms of ability, he was only in the body refining tier. And what about Ling Jian Shui? His brute strength had already reached the level of the gushing spring tier, so naturally, the battle prowess of both parties was on completely different levels. The little guy gave him a harsh beating, and Hellion Tianyan could only wail in pain. Who asked him to bully the former's mom? Yet Hellion Tianyan was only delighted as he said, "This little guy is not bad. I want to take him as my disciple, and teach him the unsurpassed ultimate secrets of the dragon race." A weird expression appeared on Ling Han's face, and he asked, Are you sure you want to take my son as your disciple? Your son? Hellion Tianyun was astonished, and said, No wonder his bloodline is so pure, and he can even actually resist my dragon's might. Haha, I am definitely going to take in this brat as my disciple. Whoever dares fight me over him, I will become hostile. Completely losing his image, he was stepped on by Ling Jianshui, still crying out loudly. Ling Han mumbled something in a low voice to Hellion Sunshui, causing Hellion Sunshui's beautiful eyes to widen. This was really her ancestor. But if Hellion Tianyun wanted to take Ling Jianshui as his disciple, then wouldn't he be on the same level as herself and Ling Han? What a mess that would be by then. Ling Han nodded and acquiesced. All right. For the sake of your seniority, I will allow my son to become your disciple. He went over and picked Ling Jianshui up, then said, Now that you've taken in your disciple, what about the first meeting gift? In any case, you're an alternative dragon, so if you're not generous enough, others would really look down on you. Hellion Tianyun laughed drily. His body had transformed into the ghostly dragon cave. Furthermore, so many years had passed, and he was really going around bare too, so what worthy treasure could he produce? He hurriedly said, I will teach all that I know to this brat, and this is more valuable than anything else. Forget it, I knew you were poor. Ling Han casually tossed out a few spirit herbs, and said, Here, take them and refine them. Quickly increase your abilities. Don't let it be that you would not be able to match your own disciple in power. Hellion Tianyun chortled, and was not the slightest bit embarrassed. He grabbed the spirit herbs and began chewing. In a short moment, the entire aura of his body spiked wildly, and he had actually broken through to the element gathering tier. Indeed, he did not have any kind of bottleneck in his cultivation, and did not need any kind of accumulation of power. Breaking through was as simple as drinking water to him. Chapter 811 Dragon Might Finally Performs. Chapter 811 Dragon Might Finally Performs. Ling Han simply set out a feast, using all kinds of precious meat and ingredients. These included the top-grade demonic beast meat, the Merides treasured pearl, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, all of which were put together in a pot and cooked. Although he was completely lacking in culinary skills, it didn't change the fact that these were excessively precious top-grade ingredients. Just by putting them together to be cooked, a tasty fragrance had already assailed their nostrils and made their fingers twitch. Hellion Tianyun was also pathetically salivating, saying, Oh, the Merides treasured pearl. Even I did not manage to obtain it those years ago. And also dragon blood tyrant ginseng, even I have only ever eaten one. These are all Nio's, you're not allowed to snatch them. Hu Nio warned viciously. Hellion Tianyun saw Hu Nio, and his eyes shone involuntarily. He said, Little girl, have you been betrothed to anyone? What do you think of me? I should be a good match for you. Pun! 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 The consequence of having such a cheap mouth was naturally to be beaten up by Hu Nio, whose assault against him wasn't light at all. Hellion Tianyun had to beg Hu Nio to stop, which made him feel extremely gloomy. In his previous life, his existence was unparalleled. How was it now that he had already been beaten up by 3 people after just having been reborn? How was it that his dragon's might could not be used again? Damn brat, could this little girl be your daughter as well? He screamed, otherwise how could she not be affected by his dragon's might? This could not only work for the dragon race, but also have a powerful suppression on other races, only that it wouldn't be as effective. Nio belongs to Ling Han. Hu Nio said savagely as she stomped her little feet onto Hellion Tianyun, causing him so much pain that he wished for death. Hellion Tianyun felt depressed. How come all the good things were taken by Ling Han? His disciple, an unmatched genius, was the son of Ling Han. Now, this strange little beauty was also Ling Han's little wife. Once the cooking was done, everyone was grabbing at the food. Facing these kinds of ingredients, even heaven-tier cultivators wouldn't dare to eat too much. At most, they would just drink a few spoonfuls of the soup, or else their body would explode. However, Ling Han, Hu Nio, Hellion Sun Shui, and Hellion Tianyun all had a humongous appetite, and each one of them ate to their heart's content. However, Hellion Sun Shui was the first to reach satisfaction. It wasn't that her stomach couldn't eat more, rather, she was unable to take in any more nutritious essence, and had to sit on the side to refine it. Ling Han, Hu Niu, and Hellion Tianyun were still eating wildly, having no intention to stop. Hellion Tianyun felt even more depressed, saying, I was nurtured by the true dragon's tooth, my body is tough, and won't explode even with the consumption of more energy. But what is it with the two of you that you can actually eat more than I? He felt that he was reaching his limit. After all, his cultivation was too low now. Useless. Hu Niu rolled her eyes at him, indicating that he was too inferior. Hellion Tianyun could only remain silent. After eating a few more mouthfuls of meat, he could only sit at one side and start refining. He was truly a monster. In an instant he had broken through a few layers and entered the gushing spring tier. Finally, he could compete against Ling Jian Shui on the same level. However, as he advanced, raising his level wouldn't be as simple. After all, the higher the cultivation, the more terrifying the amount of energy needed would be. Especially in the case of breaking through from the heaven tier to shattering void tier, the amount of energy required was staggering. Yet for him, it was only a matter to be accomplished within 1 or 2 years, or 2 to 3 years at most. As for Ling Han and Hu Niu, there was scarcely any obvious progress after the meal. After all, their battle prowess had reached the level of the heaven tier. Thus, it would naturally be more challenging if they wanted to further raise their levels. Let's go, it's time to leave here. Ling Han snapped his fingers. After packing up the pots, bowls, and chopsticks at once, they walked back in the direction they came from. Su Xiu ran and the others should still be at the entrance. Ling Han said. There is no advantage of terrain for us this time, so we need to fight all out. Pa! Leave it to me! Hellion Tianyun jumped out. He certainly didn't believe that the world was full of abnormal people like Ling Han and Hu Niu, who similarly wasn't affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han let out a mischievous laugh, and said, You had better not die so soon after having just been reborn. At least leave a few mystical powers for my son. You jinx! Hellion Tianyun screamed angrily. Unfortunately, he no longer had the godly valor as he had in the past. Otherwise, he would certainly put this human being in his place for daring to look down on him, the great Lord Alternative Dragon. They came to the entrance, and sure enough, Su Xiu ran and his group had already sensed their movement. One by one, they stood in position and blocked the entrance. Hellion Tianyun strutted a few steps ahead, and snorted. Juniors, why didn't you kneel immediately after having seen me? Su Xiu Ran's group of 4 people already knew that Ling Han possessed a spatial god tool. Naturally, they did not find the additional little brat all that surprising, and completely paid no heed to him. Donglinger said, Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and spatial god tool. You should know that you can never make it out of here alive! Hellion Tianyun was furious. They were too despicable was once again disregarded. Also, they wanted the true dragon's tooth? Wasn't he the true dragon tooth? He snorted. Wang, Dragon's Might was launched, and the mighty attack shot towards the 4 people. Yeah. Su Xiu Ran's group of 4 all released muffled groans. Under the suppression of Dragon's Might, they had all turned pale. Even though they were all rulers of martial arts, they still experienced difficulty in breathing under such Dragon's Might. Wang, Su Xiu Ran immediately recovered using the Absolute Saber. The absolutely strong saber intent flowed and instantly blocked Dragon's Might. The Son of Lightning also wasn't slow. As he brandished the mountains and rivers axe, the emission of light from this treasured tool also blocked the Dragon's Might. Hellion Tianyun could not help but let out a bitter cry. His Dragon's Might was blocked again. How could he endure this? Fortunately, these 2 juniors did not block the Dragon's Might with their own abilities, but through the use of 2 spirit tools. Otherwise, he would truly weep. He stared at the 2 spirit tools for a while, and muttered to himself. Those tools are the Absolute Saber and an imitation of the mountains and rivers axe? Having recognized them, he felt relieved. The first-generation master of the Absolute Saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, whereas the mountain and river axe originated from and was forged using this realm's power. Even if it was just an imitation, it was reasonable to have some special power capable of matching his dragon's might. Su Xiuran and the Son of Lightning could resist the dragon's might, but Small Sword Emperor and Donglinger couldn't, not even if their hands held the level 10 spirit tools bestowed upon them by their elders. These had absolutely no resistance against dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon, which had once been invincible in this world. Su Xiuran and the Son of Lightning quickly guarded Donglinger and Small Sword Emperor lest Linghan took the chance to kill them. As a result, their effective combat power had dropped to 2 in an instant. Although there were still the Absolute Saber and Mountains and Rivers Axe, their threat had been greatly reduced. Linghan laughed loudly. Wielding the Revere Life Sword, he opened up a path ahead as he rushed forward. Although Su Xiuran and Son of Lightning went all out to kill him, how could they suppress the Revere Life Sword in such a short while? Linghan, who was capable of it, was also hardly fighting zealously. He took the others away with him, leaving Su Xiuran in a limbo, wondering whether to chase them or not. If they were to give chase, then what about Donglinger and Small Sword Emperor if Linghan and his group managed to catch them off guard? If they didn't chase, then it would be certain that the other party would have obtained the true dragon's tooth. Could it be that they could only watch helplessly as Linghan and his group walked away? But in the end, they still didn't pursue. After a while, Small Sword Emperor and Donglinger recovered from the aftershock of dragon's might. Both their faces expressed fear. How could this imposing force be so frightening? The situation has progressed beyond our control. Return immediately to the Middle State. Let's request for Ultimate Elite's assistance to kill Linghan and seize the true dragon's tooth. The little boy was also extremely formidable, actually being able to release such incomparably terrifying dragon's might. We mustn't spare him either. Chapter 812 The Rio Ruler. Chapter 812 The Rio Ruler. With Hellion Tianyun leading the way, Linghan and the others didn't wander around randomly. Instead, they tried to collect as much dragon's blood grass as possible along the way. It was useless for Hellion Tianyun. He had been nurtured by true dragon's tooth, and the purity of his dragon bloodline was almost at the level of a true dragon. However, for other descendants of the dragon race, this would be good stuff. Even Linghan wanted to get more of it, given that it would be highly beneficial to his practice of 9 dragons tyrant body art. Even though it was unknown how many years or even millennia had passed, this was, after all, the original body of Hellion Tianyun. Thus, as long as he chose to sense it, he could easily find the dragon's blood grass and the true dragon bloodstone. Linghan had obtained a full harvest on this journey. If one sensed carefully, one would realize that the environment here was deteriorating and on the verge of death. The ghostly dragon cave would no longer expel people. Rather, it was slowly merging with the outside world. Its internal space was collapsing and turning into empty ruins. Henceforth, there would no longer be anything amazing about this place. After 7 days, Linghan and the others finally walked out of the ghostly dragon cave. Human! They heard a roar just as they reached the outside world. Mo Yuan appeared above them, with his entire body emitting inexhaustible flames of rage ripping apart the surrounding air. He was a shattering void tier elite. Furthermore, he had battle prowess of 10 stars or even 11 stars. Naturally, he had become extremely formidable now that he was in a fiery rage. A few days ago, he had received news that the most outstanding one among the clan's younger generation, Mo Jingxin, had died by Linghan's hand. Hence, he had gone berserk the moment he saw Linghan. Mo Yuan, what do you want to do? Hellion Rong immediately stepped out to stop him. What do I want to do? Mo Yuan gritted his teeth and said, This human killed a member of the Mo clan. I intend to capture him and bring him back to the clan for trial. Humph, that's really funny. After all, is it not normal to be killed in one's attempt to snatch treasures? If everyone was to act like Lord Mo, then wouldn't the entire world be in a mess? Hellion Rong stated coldly. Mo Yuan suppressed his rage and said, But this is a human, And he isn't qualified to enter the ghostly dragon cave. Humph, didn't you also bring in a few humans yourself? Helion Rome calmly retorted. How could that be the same? Mo Yuan immediately retorted. Those were the people recommended by the Sea Emperor. Then he's also my son-in-law. Why can't he enter the ghostly dragon cave? Helion Rong responded evenly. Mo Yuan calmed down and said, It seems that this battle is inevitable? King Helion, you'd better think carefully. This may provoke a war between the West Sea and the North Sea. Haha, you are still not capable of representing the West Sea, Helion Rong said coldly. You're seeking death. In the end, Mo Yuan exploded with fury. His entire body's blood and chi was burning, displaying endless power. Having already entered his later years, his blood one was inevitably declining. Although his cultivation remained, his battle prowess was unable to keep up with his cultivation level. At most, it was only 8 stars. Therefore, to fight an opponent like Helion Rome, he had to sublimate the burning of his blood and chi into power in order to restore the vigor of his earlier years. Lord Mo, you came here to our North Sea, yet still want to act fierce? Xian Yutong also stood out and put up a ready-to-fight posture, showing his readiness to fight side by side with Helion Rome. Hey, this is the grievance between the Mo clan and the Helion clan. Why should Lord Xian Yu get involved? When Renjie reached out with his hands and blocked Xian Yutong, clearly showing, I would not sit by idly. From his point of view, it would be best for Mo Yuan to kill Helion Rome. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so bad if both sides got severely injured from the fight either. He would then pick up the pieces. He reckoned that Xian Yutong also wouldn't be able to stop him. Therefore, he had to let this battle proceed. Taking this opportunity to kill Xian Yutong would also be good. Anyway, if either Helion Rome or Xian Yutong was to die, then there wouldn't be anyone in the North Sea who could stop his ambition of unification. An old fox like Xian Yutong naturally deduced Wenjie's motive. But deducing it was one thing, and resolving the matter was another. Mo Yuan was obviously in berserk mode, and was determined to kill Ling Han, so it was not going to be easily resolved. What to do? What to do? Xian Yutong had experienced countless storms, but the present situation still caused him to feel quite a headache. If this battle was to happen, then it might once again alter the power division of the North Sea. I command that all of you stop! A childlike voice was heard. However, only Helion Tianyun was seen walking out, his hands held behind his back, authoritatively saying, I shall become the arbitrator. All the grievances shall be settled here. Now, the most important thing is to unite all the forces that can be united in preparation for the day to split open the skies. Fuck. This big mouth, how could this matter be announced in public? Helion Rong and Xian Yutong were both shocked at the same time. They all knew about the splitting open of the skies, but hearing it from the mouth of a little brat made them feel absurd. They couldn't help but look at Ling Han. You actually let such a little brat know about the secret of splitting the skies? Ling Han shrugged his shoulders. It wasn't him who had said it, rather, it was that Helion Tianyun had already had such a plan as early as millennia ago. Furthermore, he's actually your ancestor. Ha! Mo Yuan laughed coldly as he leaped, and his palm grabbed towards Ling Han. He wouldn't kill Ling Han right now either, he had to bring him back to the Mo clan to be executed publicly. Hey, did you take my words to mean nothing? Helion Tianyun questioned icily. One dragon's might gushed out. Pa! Mo Yuan immediately dropped from the sky and fell down solidly. So what if he was at the 9th layer of the shattering void tier? So what if his battle prowess was actually 10 stars under the burning of his blood and chi? He was as weak as a baby in the face of suppression by the alternative dragon's power. This was the suppression on the level of life. It was especially effective towards the dragon race. What? Helion Rome, Xian Yutong, and Wenjie, these 3 powerhouses all couldn't help but feel a shiver in their hearts. One had to know that Mo Yuan together with the rest of them made a batch of elites, but he had actually fallen in such a sorry state. Just what was going on? Just now, the dragon's might was only aimed at Mo Yuan. Although the 3 of them were extremely strong, they still caught a trace of the aura, which made them tremble inwardly, giving rise to an instinctive fear. Mo Yuan's prostrated himself on the ground as his entire body broke out in a cold sweat. Forcefully, he raised his head, looked up at Hellion Tianyun, and said in a trembling voice, Lord Ancestor Dragon! If it wasn't the Ancestor Dragon, who would have such dragon's might, inexhaustible and powerful, causing him not to be able to put up even the least bit of resistance? Ancestor Dragon? The three elites, including Hellion Rong, felt that their scalps had become numb. Could it be possible? Hellion Tianyun's gaze swept across them as his dragon's might spread out. Pa! The three elites, including Hellion Rong, involuntarily fell to their knees. Everyone in the vicinity was staring. The four of them were at the level of the Shattering Void Tier. To kill a Shattering Void Tier elite was as difficult as touching the skies, let alone making them kneel down. Humiliating life difficulty was at least multiplied by 100 times in comparison. Could it be that this person was indeed Lord Ancestor Dragon? Hellion Tianyun couldn't help but feel proud of himself. He had been repeatedly frustrated before, so much so that he had begun doubting himself. Fortunately, there were still many normal people. He snorted and said, Now, will you listen to my words? Whatever your command, please give us your instructions. Hellion Rong and the others were prostrated on the ground, all bearing respectful and devout facial expressions. This kind of dragon's might was much too pure and too powerful, exceeding the present-day Sea Emperor by many times more. The real ruler. Chapter 813 Your Ancestor. Chapter 813 Your Ancestor. Since I have returned, then the king of the four seas shall be none other than I. Hellion Tianyun boasted shamelessly. Announce this to the whole world. Let whoever of the Ao clan to come immediately to see me and prepare for abdication. If these words were to reach the ears of cultivators in Middle State, they would definitely dismiss them and laugh at him for being a man. A mere gushing spring tier cultivator would actually dare to ask the ruler of the four seas to abdicate. Won't this be the biggest joke of all? However, the four people, including Hellion Rong, did not find this to be funny at all. On the contrary, they considered it just right. He was Lord Ancestor Dragon, whose existence was supreme without equal. Accepting the position of Emperor of the Four Seas would only be a right and inevitable matter. Otherwise, who would dare to put his position above Lord Ancestor Dragon's? Wouldn't this be tantamount to a rebellion? Only Ling Han knew that this was the Ancestor Dragon, but didn't know that who knew how many millennia ago, he was the dragon race's strongest elite who had reached the height of the Alternative Dragon. However, this Lord Alternative Dragon was reincarnated using the True Dragon Tooth, and in terms of bloodline, being called the True Dragon wouldn't be an exaggeration. Lord Ancestor Dragon, this human killed a member of the dragon race. I hereby ask for Lord Ancestor Dragon's consent for me to kill him. Mo Yuan still refused to let go of Ling Han. Hellion Tianyun glared at him, and said, This human here is the father of my apprentice, which means he is also a brother of mine. Do you want to kill my brother? With just one glance, his dragon's might permeated the surrounding atmosphere. It was incomparably terrifying. Mo Yuan immediately felt so scared that he prostrated, and said, I dare not! I dare not! An imposing Shattering Void Tier elite was actually shivering like a lamb. This was something impossible to happen in the world of humans. Having reached the height of the Shattering Void Tier, which one wasn't a genius or a ruler among rulers, how would they ever bow down? However, for the sea race, victory or defeat depended upon the bloodline. The number of elites aided by the bloodline was far more than that of the human race, yet when it came to a competition of top battle prowess, then no matter how, they could never compare. Disregarding everything else, let's take the example of the 8 kings of the Purple Moon Empire. Which one among them could Hellion Rong or Wenrenjia oppose? The sea race did have a great advantage in terms of the number of elites, but when it came to top battle prowess, the human race was indeed stronger. One would know by looking at the 1,000 Corpse sect, which could easily toss out a 15-eyed Corpse king. What did the sea race have? In the eyes of the sea race, a grander bloodline could overwhelm anything. Even though the current strength of Hellion Tianyun was low to the point of being pitiful, yet with just the dragon's might, it was sufficient to make them tremble in fear. Wouldn't this explain everything? Hellion Rong's face convulsed. While the Lord Ancestor Dragon had accepted his grandson as an apprentice, he naturally wouldn't dare to put his ranking among the generation hierarchy above or even equal to that of the Ancestor Dragon. Then, how should he address the Ancestor Dragon and Ling Han? Such a mess. It was all such a mess. Get lost! Hellion Tianyan shouted, his little face filled with pride. Before, he had to nurse his grievance for so long. Now that he could finally hold his head high for once, it made him feel so great. Mo Yuan quickly ran away in fright, not even daring to let out a fart. Both Wenjie and Xian Yutong also dared not speak any more nonsense, and thus took their leave one after another, bringing their clan members with them. Ling Han had actually become a brother of the Lord Ancestor Dragon. Who would dare to pick on him anymore? Xian Yutong felt extremely regretful for not pairing Ling Han together with Xian Yukai previously. Had he done so, he would now have built a relationship with Lord Ancestor Dragon. Really regretful. Xian Yukai also gazed at Ling Han oddly. The recent mission to Ghostly Dragon Cave had already changed her impression of Ling Han. She even had a good impression of him after being rescued by the other party. However, she would never have thought that just when Ling Han reappeared, he had become the brother of Lord Ancestor Dragon. There was no knowing how many beautiful women of the sea race would want to marry Ling Han. Even for her, as a precious jewel among them, it could be said that he was now beyond her reach, and she wasn't even qualified to act aloof in his front. She sighed inwardly. This man had never belonged to her, so she'd better forget him in the future. She left with Xian Yutong, but unexpectedly couldn't hold in her tears as they flowed from her eyes. Hey, why haven't you gotten lost yet? Hellion Tianyan looked at Hellion Rong, puzzled. He had actually disobeyed his orders. Of course, it wasn't that Hellion Rong dared to disobey, but was instead detained by Ling Han, and wasn't able to leave. Before, he would have immediately pushed Ling Han aside and that would have been sufficient. If one from the Shattering Void Tier intended to leave, how would a mere deity transformation tier cultivator be able to stop him? But how could he dare to make a move against Ling Han now? He was actually the brother of Lord Ancestor Dragon. If he was to make a move, he would be committing an act of mutiny. Anyone of the sea race could act against him. This would be treason. For the sea race, the most highly regarded matter would be one's bloodline. The Ao clan was the best example. Whoever disrespected them would become an enemy of the entire sea race. Seeing that the Lord Ancestor Dragon had flipped out, Hellion Rong quickly cast a glance at Ling Han, meaning, "Since it was you that stopped me, of course, now you must explain your actions." Ling Han coughed once and said, "Allow me to introduce to you, this is my father-in-law, your apprentice's grandfather. Furthermore, his surname is also Hellion. He is named Hellion Rong." Pooh! Hellion Tianyan immediately spewed out a sip of water, which directly splattered onto the face of Hellion Rong. Poor Hellion Rong, not only did he dare not become angry, he did not even dare to wipe it off, and still had to maintain a smile. "What, his surname is also Hellion?" Hellion Tianyan felt a sense of dissatisfaction. He immediately pointed a finger at Hellion Sun Shui, and asked, "What about her? Is she also from the Hellion clan?" "Wrong, she is my wife. Since she is married to me, that means she's part of the Ling clan." Ling Han laughed mischievously. Hellion Tianyan suddenly thundered, "Damn brat, you dare to hide this from me!" Ling Jianshui was clearly a descendant from his bloodline. There was no need for him to be accepted as an apprentice. He was an offspring of his clan's younger generation. Now that he had accepted this apprentice, his and Ling Han's ranking within the clan's generation hierarchy would be considered equal. This was a huge loss for him. Originally, Ling Han would have to take care to address him as Ancestor. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Who asked him to notice that the bloodline of Ling Jianshui was incomparably pure, which made him hot-headed. Hu Niu was upset and directly knocked him on the head, saying, "Why, you're also the same generation as Niu. Don't you know how great Niu is?" Hellion Tianyan was struck until he staggered backward, but dared not show any temper in front of Hu Niu. he weakly mumbled. But I am their ancestor, after all. What ancestors? Do you believe Neo could smash you to bits? Hu Neo unleashed an extremely fierce aura. Hellion Tianyun suddenly became like a little punching bag and dared not utter a single sound. This little girl was unaware of the severity of her moves and would act arbitrarily. He would rather offend Ling Han than this little demon. Hellion Rong's forehead was covered with cold sweat as he watched. A mere human would actually thrash Lord Ancestor Dragon. This was disgraceful indeed. Poor Lord Ancestor Dragon even had to endure it. Would he dare to oppose? Did he think that he was more powerful than the Lord Ancestor Dragon? Ling Han burst into laughter, saying, Father-in-law, he is the strongest elite of the sea race in the early days, previously known as Lord Alternative Dragon of the Ghostly Dragon Cave, and also the ancestor of the Hellion clan. He is named Hellion Tianyun. Fuck. Hellion Rong's expression immediately became extremely interesting. He would never have anticipated that the one whom he had regarded as Lord Ancestor Dragon was actually the forefather of the Hellion clan. Furthermore, he was once the strongest elite of the sea race. At that time, he had almost become a true dragon. This was also due to a gap in history. The existence of Ghostly Dragon Cave allowed the sea race to know that there had once been such an elite within their ranks. However, any information regarding him was a complete blank. This time, their generation hierarchy would definitely be in a mess. In the midst of his dizziness, this was what Hellion Rong thought. Chapter 814 Back to the Imperial Capital. Chapter 814 Back to the Imperial Capital. Everyone had been shocked, but they still left the island and headed towards Dome Cloud Island. They spent 5 days on the road, and when they had arrived, Hellion Tianyun had once again broken through another tier to become a being of the spiritual ocean tier. This kind of cultivation wouldn't hold any significance in the eyes of the elites, yet having completed a breakthrough within just a mere 5 days was an extremely amazing feat. It was reckoned that he would be able to cross the boundary to reach the spiritual pedestal tier in another 10 days, a month to reach the flower blossom tier, 2 months to reach the spiritual infant tier, 4 months to reach the deity transformation tier. A year later he would even reach the heaven tier, and begin charging towards shattering the void. He was originally the strongest cultivator of his generation. Now, his foundations couldn't be stronger, and it wouldn't be surprising for him to return to the peak of cultivation within the shortest time. Of course, all kinds of cultivation resources also had to keep up with his advancement. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a matter of 1 year, but rather 10 years, or even 100 years. Upon Hellion Tianyun's strong suggestion and request, slightly short of whining and pleading, Ling Han finally agreed to leave his son with the sea race. The true dragon's bloodline of Ling Jianshui was incomparably pure. If he were to receive guidance from Hellion Tianyun from childhood, he would be able to have the best growth. Although Hellion Sunshui was reluctant to part with her son, she could only let go for the sake of her son's future. After all, the great Ling Empire couldn't do without her governance. She wouldn't feel at ease if she were to hand it over to Ling Han. Everything was for the sake of her son. She could never have thought that, upon splitting of the skies, Ling Jianshui would precisely be a young master in the immortal realm. Ling Han left the biggest true dragon Bloodstone behind. According to Hellion Tianyun, Ling Jianshui's bloodline was already pure enough, and thus the dragon's blood grass would not be very helpful to him. Only the true dragon Bloodstone would still be of some use. Hence, Ling Han also left behind a lot of other treasures from the Black Tower. Hellion Tianyun would prepare body-strengthening medicine for Ling Jianshui to ensure that he would be getting the best growth conditions possible. Ling Han naturally felt reassured. Since Hellion Tianyun was the forefather of the Hellion clan, how could he not have his son's best interests at heart? He and Hellion Sunshui decided to come back 1 year later. When that time came, the medicine that had been left behind would nearly be exhausted. It would then be timely to replenish them. Hellion Rong was rushing to send the two out of Dome Cloud Island as if they were bad luck. He couldn't wait to brainwash Ling Jianshui was your grandfather, the person who loved you most in the world, even more so than your parents. After successful brainwashing, wouldn't Ling Jianshui become a member of the Hellion clan? How could Ling Han be unaware of his father-in-law's thinking? He laughed inwardly when his son reached the age of 5, he would definitely bring him back. No matter how close he was to his grandfather, could it compare to the bond with his own parents? While both of them were harboring their respective intentions in their minds, they laughed heartily before turning around and parting ways. Both yours and my father's laughter are so fake, Hellion Sun Shui pointed out. Want to snatch my son from me? So what if he's my father-in-law? Ling Han said, smiling. Hurry, let's go back. Having left for so long, we don't know if there's any chaos in the government. Hellion Sun Shui rolled her eyes, saying, There won't be any problems even if you don't go back for 100 years. If I don't go back, then there'll be chaos, Ling Han self-consciously said. If you say so, I will feel very guilty. It could be said that this trip had brought them an unexpected outcome. With Hellion Tianyun overseeing the affairs, the unification of the North Sea was definitely a matter nailed down. However, it was believed that the Ao clan wouldn't relinquish the power that easily, and would certainly question Hellion Tianyun's identity as Ancestor Dragon, as well as engage the power of the Four Seas to take punitive action. Unfortunately, Sea Race was a place which held one's bloodline in the highest regard. Hellion Tianyun's bloodline was indeed so pure that it could reach the condition of being a true dragon. It was no exaggeration to refer to him as Lord Ancestor Dragon. Consequently, the day of unification of the Four Seas would be imminent. This matter was much easier to deal with as compared to the 5 great sects in the Middle State. Originally, he was worried that the Sea Race and the Middle State's 5 great sects would join forces, which would give rise to an unexpected variable. Yet now it would be the turn of the Middle State's 5 great sects to have a headache. The Sea Race wasn't lacking in shattering void-tier elites. In addition to being under Hellion Tianyun's governance, every one of them would be loyal. This was a force that could be completely converged together. Ling Han felt for the first time that there was substantial progress in the movement to split open the skies. The next step would be to eliminate the 5 great sects and the 1,000-corpse sect, Ling Han said to himself inwardly. As long as these 2 forces were straightened out, then the day would come soon for the whole world to attain peace. A few days later, they returned to the desolate north. The ancient mine of Fire Country had now become a place of hell in the midst of the rising black fog. One by one, howling humanoid figures would come into being as if they were evil spirits. It was said in the middle of every night, the sound of howling spirits could be heard clearly even from the side of the former capital, which had already caused many people to move away from the Imperial Capital. It was really creepy. Among the people who had stayed, many often fell sick, causing more and more people choosing to relocate. Ling Han frowned deeply. This was an anomaly. Buried below were at least 100 shattering void-tier cultivators, who had cultivated the netherworld cultivation technique. This meant the reliance on the underground Yin Qi to turn the body of a living person into a Yin corpse. The most important thing was that no one knew how powerful these people were. If they were at the same level as the Sea Race, then they could be dealt with by just dispatching the Sea Race. However, if they were all like the Lunar King, then it would be an incomparably formidable force. I can't be bothered too much with it. It would be useless to think about it, anyway. I just need to raise the level of my strength. It doesn't matter who they are. I would suppress all of them. They returned to the Imperial Capital. At this time, a large number of reports had been sent from the front line. Having opened and looked at them, they were all good news. The West region had been basically unified, and it had come under the banner of the Great Ling Empire. The next step would be to consider the issue of attacking either the East region or the South region. For the Great Ling Empire nowadays, this wouldn't a problem. Ling Han could clearly feel that the power of the nation had gotten a lot stronger. Firstly, it was due to the territorial expansion and the increase in population. Secondly, it was because the image of the Great Ling Empire had also penetrated the hearts of the people and won the recognition of the general public. With the people's hearts being united, the nation's fortune would naturally become stronger. He began to refine the true dragon Bloodstone, cultivating the blood through his heart. Although the largest Bloodstone remained in the North Sea, they had obtained several more in the ghostly dragon cave. Later it was quite an abundant harvest. Condensing the essence of dragon blood would be helpful for everyone, but the amount would be limited. Only by means of Ling Han's and Hellion Sunshue's refining it into their bodies could such treasures yield the most perfect effect. The dragon blood essence left by the Shattering Void Tier Elite with 20 stars was really awesome. The level of Ling Han's 9 Dragons Tyrant body art was raised at an extremely fast speed. Just 10 days later, Ling Han discovered that his brute force had reached the limit of the deity transformation tier. Next, he could first rush the level of the body art to the Heaven tier, which would also bring about a qualitative change of the indestructible Heaven Scroll and raise his body to that of level 10 precious metal. This way, there would only be very few people in this world who could hurt him. He made a firm resolution to rush the level of his body art towards the Heaven tier as soon as possible. Furthermore, there had been another major gain from this expedition to the Sea Race's territory. It was that he had acquired a level 10 cultivation technique, which could allow his origin power to reach the peak of the Heaven tier. After switching to cultivating this technique, he could charge with it towards the Shattering Void tier. This technique was naturally acquired from his father-in-law, giving face to Hellion Sun Shui and Ling Jian Shui. In addition to that, with Hellion Tianyan's position as Ancestor Dragon, how could Hellion Rong refuse? Ling Han had concocted a lot of alchemical pills targeting his own condition, allowing him to better self-regulate and improve the level of his body arts. After another month, he finally advanced his body arts to the peak level of the Heaven tier. At this time, the elites of the Middle States' 5 great sects once again initiated an attack. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.